This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Elitists United. That's right, Kelsey. Believe it or not, I learned after years and years. It doesn't matter what the number of the episode is. It already is going to say it on the VOD, and in the description it's going to say it. And so, again, actually, I'm going to take my old joke and actually apply it for once, which is this isn't a radio broadcast, so it doesn't really matter that I say the number, does it? So it's just another episode. Also, YouTube has a publish by date, so if the date's after the last episode, it's not before it, is it? So problem solved. I don't know why I made that so difficult over the years, because I used to literally just every time look it up as though it was like it's like I was trying to be too diligent or some shit. Like I thought I was keeping some like epic flame alight, you know, by saying the next episode number or whatever.
I think we had like 2 number 50s of NateDOhDoubleG.
I also did do that before. Oh yeah, I also did do that. Yep. Although I will say, you know what? As a quick aside, because obviously there's another thing actually. Nowadays, I've actually made some of the intros less unreasonable. Like I usually start talking to people immediately, not like those ones where people don't know. There was actually a method to the madness. Like part of that was like, I'll just tell you straight up, I've said it in videos before, I was basically asserting dominance over the guests. I was making sure they understand, like, this is my show. You will talk when I say you will. And if I want you to be silent, you will be silent. Because if you try butting in, I'll just keep going over the top of you with some improv shit. But I'll just say this, like, it is true. This might sound fucked, but one thing that made me not want to be a perfectionist in life, because obviously it's a cool idea, you know, be as good as you can, like, you know, polish off all the edges. And this is going to be so depressing when you hear it, is that I actually realized if you just occasionally make really basic human fallible like errors, it literally increases the engagement. Like if you make a typo in an article, every comment's a typo because everyone has to be too smart, right? If you say the wrong name of a player, everyone has to reference it. Selfmade doesn't play mid lane in Fnatic, as though everyone doesn't know that and just said it, like, as though we've done like 50 episodes and then like now I just all of a sudden thought he was the mid laner, you know. But that's the sad thing, actually, Veteran. Like, it really does increase. You guaranteed the engagement. It's actually bonkers. That's why a while ago I stopped, because you know, back in the day at least, the TweetDeck app on the phone didn't used to let you copy and paste the fucking text, so you had to like rewrite the whole thing on your phone. So back then, I used to literally think, if there's a typo, who gives a fuck? It's only Twitter. And then when I noticed, this is when I noticed the trick. I noticed I would always get loads of comments of people like, that's not how you spell there. And it's like, right, I might just keep doing this. Like, or at least if I accidentally do it, I just won't be too quick to clean it up, you know.
I mean, you've just taken...
Thorin refuses editors right there.
I mean, what he's done is he's taken the logic of the best way to get the right answer on the internet is to give the wrong answer, not ask the question. Exactly. He's like, hang on a second, every right answer is another comment. It's another interaction. I'm just going to put a bunch of wrong shit in here and it's all fine. Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if people don't realise, that's also essentially my entire strategy on League of Legends talk shows. Obviously, I don't really think I know everything, do I? But in this scenario, first of all, it doesn't do anyone any good to just pussyfooting around like, oh, maybe can I just... Like, I'm not going to be the fucking Cadril host of the show. Like, I'm just going to live my life and just say my opinions, right? And then the logic goes, if I say something totally wrong, well, if the other person just sits there and doesn't say anything, then obviously they don't have a pretty good point themselves, do they? So I would hope, even if it's wrong, it just elicits, or misguided, it elicits a response from them in that sense.
And there will always be that one guy on anything that I do that reminds me that in 2016 I ranked TSM second at Worlds. So there you go. It's just...
I actually haven't reminded you of that for a long time. But yes, I do remember when you ranked TSM second at 2016.
Yep.
I do remember that. Did they even get second in their group? Oh, no, wait, no.
No, of course not, because they didn't get out of the group.
I didn't even get out of the group.
No, the most ridiculous thing as well, by the way.
That was a really good one, though.
Just since Kelsey referenced it.
Crying video, right? Like with the tears and... No, we don't remember? Okay, I'm good.
Who was crying? You?
Oh, it was like the video where people were, like all the analysts were hyping up TSM and they released the video. Like that video gets released like every year. TSM's in groups now, but in 2016 it's a really good video. So I think it's like worth.
I might go back and watch that then. I'm in the mood.
I actually filmed in. I actually started filling in the TSM coaching application on my stream, and at the what qualifies you to be a coach for us, I just put placing above you.
All right. It was a bit weird though when they kept asking for like, you know, your star sign, like do you like long walks on the beach and pina coladas and stuff, and you're like, what the fuck does this got to do with anything? But anyway, that's by the by, isn't it? You know. So actually, one thing I'll just say, just because Kelsey referenced it, and it does mildly trigger me every now and then. Since there is that particular cadre of people out on the internet, I know they're all inexperienced as fuck, so why they'd be talking, I don't know, but that's the way the internet works. There's this whole group of people, Veteran, I don't know if you've seen them, who are like esports journalists, and they've maybe been around a couple of years or 2 or 3 years, and because I famously think, basically, I'll just be straight up, I think the editors at some of the sites like ESPN and there's got are just garbage because they don't know esports, or if they do, they haven't got enough experience as an editor. It's like, that's the problem. The paradox is they're either from esports and they just start as an editor, or they're from the real world and then they don't know the esports space enough. So there's always like a disconnect there. But here's the problem, right? Because these people, and I totally get this, themselves are very new and often aren't great writers, some of that help probably, some of that editorial aspect probably does help that guy. It probably does need some tweaks. He maybe does need a suggestion as to what to cut. But what these people fail to understand, right? Because they always basically imply that, like, well, if anyone needs an editor, Thorin, it's you. It's like, first of all, I'm killing the game. Shut the fuck up. Secondly, this is a key point that they haven't even thought about. I don't know if anyone's aware, because to be fair, it was before your time. I was an editor-in-chief for over 10 years on the biggest websites on the entire esports internet. Like, as in, we were getting 1 million unique hits in, like, fucking 2009. So, I am my editor. If you wonder who my editor is, it's me. And guess what? I give myself all kinds of rope. I love me. I'm not only the editor, I'm my favourite writer. And you know what? I'm hella biased to me as well.
Yeah, there are like some anecdotes to back this up. Like, I literally had an editor once who edited best of one out of every article I wrote because they said the term didn't make sense, right? Because they got from it doesn't make sense. It's a really dumb term, but it's so frequently used in sports, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but there's no other term for that the like single game. Yeah, exactly. So it's just the balance, isn't it?
But he just like didn't get like a lot of the lingo. I had to end up defining a lot of stuff that most people just know, right, in my articles with that editor. So it's like, again, they either are experienced editors or they just that don't know the game, or they know the game and are really terrible editors. So.
I'll give you a good one. There was an editor, this is back in the day though, but there was an editor who joined a site, and obviously to me, the most dreaded editor is the one who's actually has a journalism degree and that's it. So then all they're going to do is just bash you over the head with their journalism degree 24/7. And it's like, I might as well just be in your course right now. Like, can I do some of the shit I know? So what this guy would do is he created like a style guide for this big site, right? And in it, he made one of the ultimate flaws that you would never do this if you were from esports. He made in the style guide that no matter how the player spells his name and capitalizes it, you must always capitalize it like an English noun. And so anyone who has like a really cool elite speak type name, but you know, the logic these guys don't get is if you're sick in the game, it makes the name kind of cool that you have like, you know, capitals or whatever. And so he made it that like, no, it had to be written like, you know, just like capital letter and then all lowercase. It was like, and I kept trying to explain to this guy, like, you know, this is kind of not the atmosphere. And they were like, yeah, exactly. We're going to like level the industry up and, you know, take it to a new level of professionalism. It's like, give me a break, just get me out.
Oh my God.
Oh, I remember, who was it? Was it On Gamers? It couldn't have been On Gamers, right? That did the thing where they were not going to use gamer tags. They were only going to use the full names. I forget. There was like one.
I don't think it was On Gamers, but there was some site was going to do that where they were just going to use names. I know that there was a certain
tournament. There was a tournament that was going to do that, no? Like a couple of years back, or at least half a decade back, I swear to God, there was a tournament where they didn't, it was another one of those like TV show things where they wanted to do like their own gaming tournament on TV, but they insisted that you didn't use usernames, you only used real names. Was it related to that?
I don't think so. Here's the thing. It's actually one of those common, like, in my opinion, like NPC fucking discussions that just comes up in the industry every now and then, along with, like, how do we spell esports? Like, should it be on television? Are we sports? It's like, you guys are just bored. Like, you're on the water cooler right now. Like, what's going on? So it's just a classic one of those, Veteran. Like, someone always be like, you know, if we want to be taken seriously, we should do this. It's like, motherfucker, I don't take you seriously. Shit, sit down. And also, the person saying that's never famous for their name. That's the other part that I love as well. Like, it's always ridiculous in that sense. So anyway,
someone taking the outsider's perspective on esports without realizing that the market they're trying to market towards is not the outsiders anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's the joke, isn't it? I always tell people this, by the way. The biggest disconnect to me is why is everyone still doing that topic of like, we need to get more people in the game? It's like, dude, we've got all the people we need. It's just we can't monetize them yet. Like we've got an insane audience that's literally tuning in and watching like Wi-Fi, like fucking lo-fi webcam shows and like online streams. Like they're watching all this shit.
We are actually at the point where like brands are getting into esports to attract like this generation, right, or the younger generation. So it's not that we don't have the audience anymore. It's that, yeah. I at least every industry sucks at monetizing, though. Like, it's not a problem.
Yeah, sure.
Esports.
I mean, at the very least, like I haven't really seen this issue in the last like couple of years, right? But definitely half a decade back, this was always the issue: is people thinking they had to like fix esports, and now people realize there's just a massive amount of people willing to spend disgusting amounts of money, especially given that most of the big games now and the big cash cows are effectively free games. League of Legends is a massive
exactly.
It's essentially a free people buy aesthetics for their free game. There's like everyone here, let's be real, a large amount of people who play this game don't really have other places that they spend their money anyway. They're just like waiting for people to release content for them to spend money on that are based around their favorite hobby. And people are they've realized that in the last few years. You know, the scene's exploded and we don't get this kind of issue anymore. I feel really sorry for my initial editor at The Score, actually, which is a job that Kelsey actually helped me get. But that guy had told me that like 1,000 words is kind of like a guideline, but it's not like I don't really have.
There's another trigger for everyone else in the call.
Yeah. But the thing is, I would hand him like 2,700 word articles and shit, and I wouldn't come into the editing issues everyone else has. And the reason why is I think that they handed in like 1,100 word articles, and the guys trying to find ways to cut it down by 100. I hand them 2,700. They're like, all right, there's no way we can cut this down. So they just like spell check it up, you know. So I think I like avoided that.
I mean, if you looked at mine and Fion's articles for The Score, we didn't really have 1,000 word articles either. So I don't know why he would have told you that. Why we didn't have long articles.
That was the glory days of LOL Esports.
A freelance thing, right? But yeah, The Score was one of those places that let me kind of get away with doing whatever I wanted, and the editors basically just proofread and also gave like some suggestions for formatting and basically structure in the article that I found helpful. So like The Score is still a really, really good job that I had.
Because, you know, looking back on it now, like, the problem is Kelsey didn't tell me for ages that they had that like guideline at LOL Esports. So I would be telling her privately stuff like, when are you going to do like a massive career article on Wage Out? It's like, dude, I've got 1,000 words. Like, what am I going to do? Like, that's going to be like 4 paragraphs and it's just got to end, isn't it? Like,
the longest like 1,000 words is a very strict 1,000 words, because I did work with them last year. It's an incredibly strict 1,000 words, and they have a massive issue when it comes to titles. Like, some of the best titles I had just got like removed immediately for what was essentially a short description of the article in the title rather than anything really hype, and it always really tilted me every time.
I actually didn't have that problem when I worked for LOL Esports EU. Just and initially when I worked for LOL Esports, it was fine too, but it was like they had this really, really random in the middle of the time that I worked for them. They freaked out and decided, oh, we're not making enough money. Like, we're just basically bleeding money on the site because we're paying a lot of money per article and no one is really reading the article. So that's when you had like the Taylor Cock Zillion article that I think some people still remember. I don't even remember. It was just like the one where like he swore in the article and the article ended up getting taken down. I forget what it was exactly.
It was something like, you know, that goddamn Zillion or something like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was like from Zillion's POV at Zillion, where like on marijuana or something like that, like just like I don't remember.
What is this premise?
That was the article.
I just love the idea.
That was like the impetus for it, right?
No, I just love the idea you're coming to him though.
Got like completely chewed out and attacked, but a lot of it came from like the editorial changeover that they brought in and like kind of dethroned Frank Fields, who is a really good guy to work for, actually.
That's the sad thing, though, is like it's the idea that article gets through and isn't considered inappropriate. But if you're like, can I do 1,050 words? Like, definitely not. And never ask again. You know what? I'll actually give it up. Even though he was a bit of a wanker in terms of some of his online behaviour, unquestionably. The thing with Frank Fields is I actually do mildly miss him, because here's the thing. Yeah. He actually was a very good antagonist for the scene. I mean, I'm not going to buy at all, by the way, that he did that on purpose. And he was doing like, they were definitely all his opinions. They definitely were. If you just look, because they were very consistent, basically, as to the criteria he would use. And obviously, he was very much. I mean, nowadays, I guess they're a bit more legit on like LEC, but he was very much of the ilk of like the narrative can be somewhat forced. Like, for example, famously, you know, Doublelift is a top 20 player at Worlds, but then like fucking some sick player from Rocks Tigers isn't, because just double lift, didn't it? Like he was very much in that vein. But the key thing is, it did start all the good conversations. I mean, most of them were like, I disagree with him, or he's wrong, or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely disagreed with most of his opinions, but I always kind of defended them because he had his own like logic for them, right? So he was also really good to work for, so I usually defended him,
But he had opinions, you know, like that's
exactly.
I remember his golden age of competitive esports thing, right? And that sparked a massive discussion where you either thought that this was a really entertaining part of League, or you thought that season 5 was a complete mistake and we need to revert back to season 3 right the fuck now, right? But back then, figureheads were basically like, I have everybody with this opinion, and then there's another figurehead that has all the fans with this opinion, and then all the fans would like clash with each other on Reddit until one of their 2 demigods like said another thing to come in, and that was basically all it was at the time. And now we don't really have that anymore. It's there's basically 2 massive distinctions, and it's essentially there's the actually, wait, it just occurred to me the reason why we don't have that anymore is because there is no straightforward Korea is just straight dominant and everyone else is just trying to catch up, and you either accept this to be it or you don't accept it to be it. And most people fell into one of these 2 things. Either it was possible to catch up or it wasn't possible to catch up. The golden age of esports thing fell so flat on its face because most people have the idea that there was only one good region, or you were of the idea that there were multiple good regions and they could actually catch up. And that hasn't been the case ever since G2 and the Chinese teams came on the scene and just completely upended that, right? And so now everything's kind of everywhere, and now that people actually have to have well-reasoned opinions, we're finding out that most people didn't have well-reasoned opinions, and people like Mirhi back in the day wouldn't be able to survive right now because there isn't a straightforward narrative of like these bunch of guys are really fucking good and these bunch of guys are just nowhere near as good as them, and it just the difference being whether you think those guys can catch up or not. That dichotomy doesn't exist anymore. There's no place for the people who just farmed Korea for clout like they did back in the day. But like people like Kelsey have been able to survive in that era because people like Kelsey always had like very well-reasoned opinions. But it's very difficult for most people.
Plus, define survive.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a relative term, right?
I'm trying to avoid saying you actually have to be smart to be an opinionated guy now, but you kind of do because nothing is straightforward anymore.
I mean, sort of. You can also be really, really well presented. You know, you can be really, really well presented and not necessarily have good reasoning to back it up. I think that's fair too. Like there are some people on the scene who I think are kind of like that.
Have any of them ever coached teams and they have like a really deep voice? Sorry, I don't know why that. Don't even know why that came to mind. I went off on something there. You know. By the way, for anyone who's watching this now and is thinking like, "Fuck, are they ever going to talk about a game?" Like, first of all, it's literally like the mid-season. Like, there's nothing going on. This show shouldn't even technically exist. So you should be grateful for anything we give you.
This is Elitists United. This is Elitists United. Literally stands for EU, and EU Masters just finished its group stage and is going into quarterfinals in just 2 days. I reject the idea that nothing is going on.
All right, so we're talking about EU Masters, are we?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Yeah, I would love to.
Of course, we're not. We'll wait till that shit's over, and then we'll have someone on and we'll talk about it. I'm not going to watch it for 3 weeks, mate. I'll watch it when it's over, and I'll cherry pick the good games.
I mean, the playoffs are about to start, right? I think the playoffs are about to start.
The playoffs.
Yes, you're just through the bracket now.
The playoffs
because the tiebreakers were today. I've just been kind of like spamming VODs and not really paying attention to chronology or what's going on or anything like that. So.
Well, it's going to be Mouse versus Rogue as like the first game, which should really be the final. So that's the leader team. So that Thorin understands. And the Polish team that used to be, the Rogue team that was so good that they ended up being the main team were previously the Rogue team that is currently there now, right? So Mystiques is actually still on that team. Woolite, yes, has still survived Thorin and is fucking there right now. Sigenda, who in my opinion is the best top outside of LEC, is in that team, and they go up against Leader's team, which you said really early on in the split could be an NALCS playoffs team. You remember that team, for? Yeah. So they're going up against.
By the way, I meant that like, you know, let's say like 60% legit, because obviously it was just a guess anyway, and obviously 40% was to make fun of NA. After watching NA, I think actually I'll lock that in at like fucking 90%. After watching the split.
So honestly, like another thing is like I think they'll set up the map really well, and then they'll just like int into a 5v5, and their team fighting is not that great.
Perfect LCS team.
So yeah, maybe.
Sounds great.
I actually think that their lane setups after like 15 minutes are generally pretty bad. Actually, like I think they're very out of sync with the objectives on the map, and that's why they end up inting into fights so much. You know, like
I think that they'll set it up like as if they'll set it up if the objective is to trade like away from the objective, right? They'll set that up, and then they'll pull all the pressure. So I think that's good, right? Like if you want to trade away,
it can be if you're not giving soul.
Because you don't have if you don't have a 5v5 comp, then I think that's normally how you should set up the map, right?
Sure.
So this will be like maybe for your second or third dragon.
Yeah, but normally what will happen is that they're reset.
Then they'll just do that, and then they'll int into the fight, and so that sucks.
Sure.
By the way, why does Woolite just always hang around? Like, is he one of those people when he goes to a challenger level who's actually good then, relative to the people who are at that level?
I mean, I don't even think he's like top 5 in AD carry right now, and all the Polish people just unsubscribe for me for saying that. But I legit don't even think he's top 5 in the ERLs right now. But I actually do think it was good that we kept him.
Fair enough.
Like for me, the last off season was just a dichotomy of two teams, and one was Misfits and one was Rogue. And Rogue knew that they wanted to make changes to their roster that they had brought back from Challenger Series, right? And actually did really well for them, similar to Misfits. Misfits brought the Challenger Series org in, and that Misfits roster beat Fnatic and beat Splice in games that mattered for their seeding. So those teams are maximum tryhard. They beat all the top teams, except for G2. Before they got disbanded. Rogue simply made one adjustment, which was to the AD carry role. They brought in Hans Sammer for that, right? And then instead of just firing Woolite and dumping him in the wind, they dropped to the academy team, right? Which is good. If Woolite couldn't find another offer, they kept him. They didn't just throw him out to the wind and say it's not our problem anymore. Misfits, on the other hand, took the only roster that they had fielded that had a winning win rate. They didn't release leader and Heaver until after all the other teams had solidified who they wanted to take. They used the fact that they could technically go with a buyout as an excuse, but there had been a market failure in Europe at the time, so all actual free agents were massive priorities for every team because they just can't afford shit like that anymore. And then they released them too late to be able to find an LEC team. And then they just grabbed a bunch of new people, and you have the roster that you have right now, right? There was no reward for being loyal to Misfits last year, whereas Rogue have stayed true to their players the whole time. Like what Rogue have done is a really good example. If you join Rogue, and it's why they've been able to field another really good roster in the ERLs, players know that if they join Rogue, they will be rewarded and they won't just be destroyed by their org. Whereas players also know that you can't trust Misfits, right? Which is why, like, the recent rumor of like Special to move back up to XL is really fucking good in my eyes, because that's righting a wrong. Special should never have been dropped in the first place of Mickey, and second, it doesn't just readdress that, but it shows that if you do join XL, they will at the very least reward you at some point. And Rogue had understood that previously. Misfits hadn't understood that previously, and that's why Woolite is like hanging around for him. But I think that the fact that Woolite is still able to hang around in Rogue signifies how good that org has actually approached these off seasons, and it will pay dividends for them in the future. Sigenda may well just stay there until he can promote,
And there's also I mean, you can say that, but there's also the Hiku, right? Like Hiku is just in the win now. So like I think Woolite is more because he's Polish, and they need 3 Polish for Ultra Liga,
sure,
right?
There's that as well.
Like I think that's also a factor. I also think that you have to consider that a lot of like the high prio EUM ADCs or like the ERL ADCs got promoted to LEC teams.
LEC, yeah, sure.
Like Carzzy and Comp, right? So yeah, I think Woolite's not bad. Like as a pickup, as an AD, and the fact that he has Polish nationality is really useful. So.
By the way, shout out to that Misfits GM just once more. Like, the idea that after your abomination of a spring team, that then as Veteran says, you bring in a bunch of rookies, they come in late in the split. They're not even initially brought in as a 5-some. They're brought in like one. I think they brought in like 1, then 2, and then the whole team. And after you do that, they beat 2 of the top 3 teams in the league, but don't make the playoffs. So you go, well, there's no fucking potential here. Fire them all, like, except for the one guy who actually, of all of them, has a little bit of potential, but actually is the furthest from realizing it yet. And it's like, never mind all the ones that look like almost the finished product. Fuck those guys, right? Misfits GM's amazing. He's like the guy where the joke is like, it's like if you knew someone who's terrible at investing in the stock market, and you're like, can you just let me know whatever you're invested in so I can go the other direction? Like, that's like what I want to do with this Misfits guy.
I mean, what sickens me the most about that whole situation is that all of the people in management from last year who participated in all these decisions, all the people in management who participated in decisions of making the initial, probably the most expensive failure in Europe roster that has ever existed, all of those guys have not been fired. They, in fact, have been promoted. Misfits do not fire staff. They simply promote them. The only one who is not there anymore is Jess's, and Jess's wanted to become a player and became a player again for an ERL team. That's the only reason why. It's not like they wouldn't have kept him if they could have. They are very happy to fire players non-stop. No matter what, but staff, they are fucking hella protected over there. Like, that dichotomy just sickens me, to be honest. Like, holy shit. And they'll be punished for it to Kingdom Come. I mean, you can't expect those guys to suddenly start making good decisions after 3 years now of making terrible ones. Like, holy shit, it's insane to me.
Now, what about this then? Since we've already basically pivoted into the LEC, why don't we just do the XL one first then, since you just brought it up? So Special returns is the mid laner. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing here, Veteran, is this is why you have to always set up the context of the narratives before you talk about teams in the present moment, because obviously, despite the fact that on the one hand, people flame the fuck out of Mickey for all the stupid drama and all the stuff in NA, at the same time, every time he has a pop-off game, people are loving it and they're like, oh, wow, this guy is good, etc. So, the real problem is this. I never saw any fanfare around Special. I saw him have a couple of good games that split, but he never got any of the fanfare for some reason. To be fair, obviously, they weren't as good an XL team as they are now. They were a bottom feeder and they were just battling to even be relevant for the playoffs.
Sure, yeah, they did start beating some of the bigger teams towards the end. That was when they had both. But
it was when it was out of, they weren't going to make playoffs, and then they did that stupid shit where when you can't make it anymore, you just win a couple on the way out the door, whatever, Yeah,
but they also subbed in Mystique's Jeskla for that. And both of them also got removed as well, and Special got removed. But yeah, Special is far too good for the ERL scene. Him, Magic Felix, and Leader quite clearly deserve better than what they have in ERLs. The only person who makes Magic Felix look human is actually Leader. It's the only time that I've seen Magic Felix look human, and Magic Felix actually looked like he was fucking shitting himself as his leader. It was insane. I said on stream that he was so conservative. He made Mussolini look like a communist. It was absolutely insane watching him try to play as if.
It's not a bad line, Veteran, but I'm just going to say this, mate. It's a good line, but again, that whole thing where you're trying to build this career in a Riot game. I just take certain names off the list and certain political concepts just out. Listen, on this show, it's a great line. Maybe just keep it away from anything to do with the competitive game,
Okay, but anyway, Special is quite clearly in the upper echelon. He just hard carried XL to the quarterfinals. They were 0-3, and they just did a massive 3-0 sweep in the second week. And he was the major driving force on that. He won my player of the day for that. I think he makes a massive difference there. I think he plays. He's a lot more versatile in the champions that he plays than Mickey was. He's far more consistent in his understanding of laning than Mickey was. And very crucially, one big thing that Special is good at that other mid laners of his ilk aren't good at is he's particularly good at working with jungler to snowball lanes. He's very good at that. His current jungler is a guy called Taxa, and I don't actually rate him very highly whatsoever. But Special's basically doing the work for him. His most well-known champion in DRLs is Syndra. And it's the way that he uses that priority to transfer to other lanes that is so insane about him. The fact that he gets the priority is basically a given right now with him. He's just mechanically superior to the vast majority of ERL mids. But that's the big thing. Go on.
So I actually only watched the Geo BTXL games. So in EUM so far. And I saw the Cinderly Sin one. I actually thought that in the 1v1 and also that Tokubel, who I'm not... Takui? Yeah, I don't know.
Takui, he's only 17. I think he's just turned 17.
He was really not impressive in either game, but I think that like he basically won that off of jungle pressure. So obviously he seems to me like a player that's like, oh, okay, we're taking advantage of the fact that I have Lee Sin Syndra, which is one of the strongest like mid jungle combos, and we're just going to snowball the line like that. I was actually like, I was really impressed by like deadly positioning and skirmishes that game. I was like kind of shocked.
This wasn't the Draven game, was it? Please tell me.
It actually was.
Fuck
was
me, he dropped so many axes that game.
He dropped a lot of axes, but like the skirmish on the top side, like the flash, and I thought that was really good.
The top side, that was actually really good, but he didn't actually cancel the R properly. But that was really nicely done, yeah.
But like his positioning in skirmishes and stuff like that, I thought was good. So just like as an AD carry, not necessarily as a Draven player, I was like surprised because I didn't remember Deadly being like that good. And then but like the focal point of special drawing pressure early with his jungler, I thought was high. Yes. Obviously, Taxer historically hasn't really stood out in tournaments, but I guess for me, I'm not necessarily rating Special's laning mechanics, so that's what I was kind of surprised by. Like, I think that he got away with the LeBlanc versus Azir game because it was clear that Tokui didn't really know how to play that matchup. Yeah. He just kind of let LeBlanc do whatever on the first wave, and then LeBlanc just roamed.
Yeah.
So I think like he's very good at generating pressure, but I'm not sure if his individual laning is too insane. Because like 1v1 Cinder versus Orianna, I expected Ori, especially like with so much pressure from Lisa, and I expected Ori to get punished a lot more than she was.
So the thing about the special leader Magic Felix kind of line is because both those guys are the only two that can contest Magic Felix in that regard. And special was a major reason why they were able to get, like, they actually had a perfect split until they got reverse swept in the finals versus Fnatic. But he was a major part of why they were able to hold that. What you just said, though, is why I think pairing him with Cajal is really insane, because he can play off the kind of jungler that can actually output that kind of pressure consistently really fucking well. And Cajal is a guy who is very strong at just winning his jungle matchup straight up. And now that post 10-8, at least in my opinion, we're moving into a meta where playing 4 jungle matchups should be the be-all end-all of and the purpose of laners again, which, by the way, I think is what Korea has always been trying to do and been trying to force even when they really shouldn't. So this would theoretically benefit them in the theoretical world champion in the future. I may have an opinion on that. But this means that I think Special will probably be the perfect mid laner for them.
I disagree if that's what you think. Like, if all we're doing is playing just for jungle matchup and we aren't applying jungle pressure to lane, which is what I thought like stood out about him, was that the way that his jungler worked with him to get pressure, I feel like he'd be better in a meta where you can like force 2v2s mid a lot. Because like his individual 1v1 laning in terms of just getting perma prio, I didn't think was that good. Like he was kind of like even in both lanes, even when I think he should have had the advantage in the 1v1.
Also, wait a minute.
Again, I'm going off of a sample size of 2 against 1 player, right? So maybe, even though I thought Takuya was like really nothing, maybe he's better than I think.
Well, then here's what Veteran has to answer. If he disagrees with that, then what he has to basically explain is that he's not just saying that like Special should be in LEC. He's implying he should be like in the middle of the pack or something, because mid lane's one of the strongest roles in LEC right now.
I think that I was impressed by like. So what I have watched a lot of Special in the context of LEC, and I thought that when he first started out, he was really, really whatever. And then, of course, we saw him the year before a bit. He played some sub games in scrims for Misfits, I recall. Like, so those are like most of my experiences with Special. And I think that like I was impressed by how much he improved over the course of last year in last spring, in a context where that roster wasn't getting any wins, but he had like the mental and the diligence to actually just get better every time I saw him, which was really impressive to me. So maybe he'll do really, really well when he goes back to LEC.
I just want to slightly defend Takuya by saying that he had a really good split in France, and he's also insanely young. He was 16 for most of the year.
I mean, that's fair.
I will admit.
Like, I was just really disappointed in his review matchup. So
yeah, he didn't have a very good second week for sure. But I do still think that Special, Okay, so admittedly, we haven't seen Special have to play for jungle matchup, but we have seen Special work with his jungler for his jungler's priorities, even if right now those are transferring pressures between lanes. I think that it's very easy for him to, especially given what you've just said about how you perceive his ability to learn, I think it's very easy for him to switch from that into simply playing straight up for jungle matchup. You can bounce pressure as jungler from laners into your own matchup. Like just because you've gone for priority in midsection and are now intending to move it towards the lane doesn't mean you can go for priority in midsection and then have him hold the lean so that you can invade Raptors, for example. Yeah, like that's not that difficult to translate to, especially a player like Special who has shown he can make significant improvements very fast. The Misfits one, by the way, he was the initial starter for the Misfits roster in the UK at the time, and then he fell ill, and then they got an emergency sub that was Leader, and that's how that began. So Leader was technically a sub there, but yeah.
But yeah,
so okay, yeah, go on.
But yeah, I guess for me, I'm more, if it goes to like 1v1 laning being more the norm, then I think I would be like slightly worried for him. But I think I am impressed by how much he was improving on a roster that was basically shit, because no one works hard on rosters that are shit. Let's just be honest there.
Veteran, here's the issue though. Is he going to do that if he's in the LEC on XL? Is he going to have priority all the time?
So obviously,
is he going to be a lane beast?
Well, obviously that will be matchup dependent. I think
you've got your boy Krol there. You can't. There's no excuses now, mate. Someone's got to perform.
I mean, if he has Krol, then yeah. Like that's the thing. If jungle is going for lane priority, then yeah. Obviously, the question that you just asked doesn't matter. If we're talking about strictly one-on-one,
I mean specifically
like
in
Kelsey
XL. Like, should we expect to see this in LEC basically the way he played in EU Masters?
I mean, yeah, because we've already seen that partly from him in the last few games that he was playing with XL on the LEC, when he was playing them, admittedly, mostly with Zoe, he was still holding the same thing. Like that team's issue was closing games. It definitely wasn't trying to get an early lead. That team's issue was closing games. And obviously, I don't think he's about to penetrate like the Perks, Featherven top 2 area or Nuke Duck at peak. But I do think he can slot comfortably in with the conversation around Humanoid, Nemesis, Larson, right? I obviously think that all 3 of those are going to be a bit better than him right now, but someone like Nemesis, who, as Perks said on the show last week, kind of gives priority anyway. Special can run away with a player like that. But someone like Humanoid, who very aggressively goes for his own priority, like that's someone that Special will have to level up to be able to take on properly, right?
I don't disagree with this.
Yeah, so he's kind of middle of the pack initially, but he has a lot of potential for sure.
Overall, like the Special thing is still technically a rumor, right? Insofar as it's reported by Jacob Wolf or whatever. But I think that I think that like I'm happy about the move, right? It's not something that I looked at and was like, oh, this is dumb, right? They should have gotten this guy instead.
Okay.
So
I mean, I don't know why everyone's making it a big deal. Like, listen, Nemesis is obviously just a really cool guy, isn't he? So unselfish. He wants you to be the priority. Like, he wants to focus on other people. And he's willing, you know what? Everyone always complains that everyone's toxic in the West and everyone has a big ego. This is why solo queue shit. He knows how to be carried. He's willing to just sit back and be carried. Will you guys... And listen, obviously he's got his fucking... LS fucking Palpatine in his ear, like, that's right, my student, do nothing, scale. The game will defeat them, not you. Why would you ever take a risk? Like, obviously that's going on the whole time. Exactly, yeah.
if you just sit under your turret, they'll push the wave to you so that they can go to another lane. And then if you call it, then it's that guy's fault, isn't it? No.
Exactly.
Every time.
See if you can freeze the lane.
I mean, so obviously we're just talking about leaks, but like I have been in contact with XL with regards to recommendation stuff. I would say that I would recommend Special going up. And obviously that's not like a confirmation or anything. But speaking of which, I probably would also say something like, you know, if you're looking for a really strong player that you can probably get on the cheap, who's also very underrated right now, Cries would definitely be massively up there on the list. So this guy, okay, so Thorin's going to learn of the existence of the Nordic scene right now is split up into, it's about to be correlated in with the UK league for some weird reason to one big Super League. But the Nordic League has typically been like they've actually split the individual countries, Sweden, Denmark, blah blah blah. Kreis was on the Swedish team. On the best Swedish team there. He was like the only good part of that team, but he was so unfathomably good that they would have actually qualified over a version of Rogue that had Selfie on it. And it had Selfie, Ice Beasto, Hiku, all of that lot. It had that roster. The only reason that those guys were able to beat Kreis's team was because Kreis's jungler forgot to buy a jungle item at the start of the game. All right, and they still got all the way to their Nexus. If the guy had actually been jungling at the start of the game, it wouldn't even have been close. And Kreis is a massive part. I mean, he was the only real part of that. Him on Aatrox was just a 1v9 machine the whole time. I consider him one of the best Camilles on the server, if not the best Camille on the server. And they were so close to qualifying for this particular EU Masters, which they haven't. And I'm super excited to see this guy in because he's the kind of player that you really like. For it's also so we were talking a bit before the show about how like these Marins, these Khans, like all these top laners kind of hold these guys up because that's like the ideal of how they think top lane should be played.
Sure.
Kreis is a guy who's just played like that. Like he is the Giga split pusher. He will pick Jax, Camille, Fiora, all this shit and split push to shit and carry the entire game himself and put all of that weight on his back. That's really insane for this team, especially given that thus far expects kind of just being a Renekton bot, right? And like we've had massive issues with the fact that this is the only champion that this guy appears to be wanting to play anymore. So I think they're a lot more versatile now in how they can play out the game. And given the kind of pool that Patrick showed in the last split as well, and given the fact that Youngbuck is their coach, I think they know how to play really well with like a heavy priority top side. But also Kreis has shown that he can do more than that, and he's probably going to be more willing to play weak side given that he's on an LEC team. But this guy is actually like he's come out of nowhere pretty much. One split in Sweden, then one split in Germany. But I'm actually really excited to see him on the main stage. Like he'll be another one of these like super heavy carry top lanes, kind of the opposite of Dandan in that regard. Dandan was primarily known as like a weak side scaler. Right, so yeah, but no one's really heard of this guy before.
The implication then, Veteran, is you now need to make a prediction because if that team, obviously, this is, I mean, it depends when it's released, but let's imagine this all happens, right? This is really the lineup that XL has now, right?
Yeah,
we already like the coach. In theory, every player on the team in some context you now like or thinks good. And by the way, some of them are good. You know, it's just the team didn't. I mean, actually, they did all right. They did fine. They were like one game, or I think they were 2 games away from making the playoffs. So, like,
yeah.
And some of them were losses to not that great teams either. So it wasn't even possible.
This is a comfortable playoffs team for sure. Like, this will definitely make playoffs. I don't think if Misfits.
They're basically battling Misfits and Rogue then.
I don't. Yeah, well, Misfits will be the ones that I think drop, right? And the other thing is that I think even though Vitality gets their team back, I think Vitality will be very harshly competing with this XL lineup for that spots. So
Vitality with a mid lane change is still has so many problems, I think. So yeah. Doesn't really matter what happens with Vitality, I think. But yeah, I was surprised because I watched that series and I didn't even register that it was the same guy because I don't really care about nameplates when I watch EUM sometimes. But or not, it wasn't EUM even, it was the qualifying series, right? So
I mean what
I'm talking about Kreis,
yeah. I mean Kreis was in group plans. But honestly, so we had this conversation on the one that we had with like Mac and Grabs, but like top lane is actually a bit of an issue right now in Europe.
Yeah,
like,
top lane is sad.
Yeah, the only
top laners are really sad when I watch
the
it.
only good top laner in the whole of EU Masters right now is Sigenda. It's literally the only one. It's the only one.
But you're not a fan of Ibo? The I'm gonna drop wave to go to Dragon and then like into flank mid. You don't like Ibo?
Okay, that's every on player now. But Ibo I actually really loved in 20.
I mean, I think he's like Ibo for me.
2018.
Really solid and really versatile still. Like I'm kind of impressed with him based on the 2 games that I watched, but he's still just like, okay, serviceable top laner in EUM level.
The thing is, I'm a massive fan of this like rising talent called the Antonio from Spit. Obviously not. I just said that. I just said, I know. I just said that to trigger Veteran.
The LPL semifinals, right? We were watching the LPL semifinals, and an entire game was a fucking conversation about D'Antonio. Like, what is this shit? Like, this has nothing to do with what is happening.
Okay, what I will say is D'Antonio just got knocked out of EU Masters by fucking Bando, and Bando has been gifted.
Bando should not have
awards twice, right?
Shit.
Like Bando is the only guy. Right. So far in those, I've been giving like awards at the end of the day for each EU Masters, and I have like 4 good awards that people want to get, and then I have the Usain Bolt award for the biggest sprinter, for the guy who ran it down the hardest. Okay. Bando is the only guy who has won it multiple times, and D'Antonio just lost to him. So that's a bit. That being said, admittedly, D'Antonio's jungler was 4 levels over. I mean, not D'Antonio's. Bando's jungler was 4 levels over D'Antonio's jungler, but still, yeah.
Sounds like you should call him Rubber Bando because you should fire him off. There you go.
I mean, I think I've never heard anyone make that. I have no idea why no one's actually.
I know. How was that not coming to anyone's mind?
Yeah, that's actually true. I mean, what I will say is that like my issue with D'Antonio is he essentially just plays 3 champions properly, and it's Poppy, Cho'Gath, and Sion, and even then he doesn't actually win lanes that he should be winning with them. He doesn't seem to understand the mechanics.
What is it with Spanish top laners who play like 2.5 champions and then think they can have a career?
Jeez, I wonder which other guy you're referencing.
Who could know? We won't say his name though. We won't say all the Voldemorts and make them all the demons appear from hell.
They're just all going to be in DMs after this.
What I will say is you are obviously referencing like the tweet I made about his fan base, and like some people responding to me like, it's just the Spanish fans, they're really passionate. It's like, okay, it's not like so the Werlib fans, right? The Werlib fans will
actually
still
just said his name like that.
I know.
But
it's all right, we all know who he was.
The Werlib fans will still DM me every now and again with like a screenshot of how SK were before Werlib and how SK were after Werlib, forgetting that that's also before and after self-made, and saying Werlib is the problem, right? That's what they will do. But D'Antonio fans have tried to fucking dox me and shit already in my DMs. They're sending me literal death threats, trying to dox me, sending actually racist stuff. Like, this is a different level. This is not Spanish passionate fan base.
No.
This is a different level.
That's basically on the level of the TSM.
I just don't understand how you can have that level of passion and defense over a Cho'Gath main. Like, let's be honest here.
Exactly.
Like Werlib, I kind of understand because Jax is like a really sick champion to watch and I really enjoy that kind of thing. Right? But like a fucking Cho'Gath Sion main. It's like, did you see that sick ult? He got 2 turret plates. Oh my god.
That's the part in general in esports I've never understood about when people bring patriotism into esports. Because you have no connection to these people aside from that they were born in your country. So the weird thing is, in esports, you're free to pick from all these styles. That you pick the style you like. The idea that you're like, well, I have to pick one of these 2 fucks because he's from Spain. Like, you don't. You really don't. Because by the way, that means basically that the Antonio fans, Veteran, are already on the TSM fan level. Because every now and then, this is not a joke, I'll just get one of those emails from Twitter, like, this tweet was reported. But you know, it just says I took no action. And it'll just be some literal, by the way, like there never would be anything in this tweet that would ever get banned, but it's just some salty TSM fans like, how dare he give an opinion I don't like, and they just reported it as though Twitter's going to be like, well, I guess they're hoping eventually there's just some biased like TSM fan in the Twitter mod database who's like, yeah, actually fuck this guy, like suspend his account. But it's never going to happen, is it? Because it's just some mild tweet. It's not like I'm calling them a cunt or anything. I'm just saying they're bad or whatever, or they're an idiot.
I saw, by the way, in your recent spate with TSM, that you also chose this choice time to signal a tweet in praise of Reckless.
You like that?
You're doing that, yeah. You're getting the fanatic fans, right? You're getting the fanatic fans, all right, and you're gonna set them off against the TSM fans, all right, in a big let them fight moment.
It was like when it was like when they needed to bring like the Dothraki up to fight against like the Army of the Night or whatever, you know. I don't like the Dothraki, but you know what? I need some frontline soldiers to throw at the enemies so I can buy some time, you know. So.
Nice.
Exactly. And what everyone forgets, by the way, is if TSM actually gets good, they are the natural enemies anyway, Fnatic fans and TSM fans, because they're both obviously equally deranged, you know, just with a different god, you know. It's like a holy war.
Yeah, it's just like they're like, well, all the fan bases, like at Worlds, there'll be like TSM v Fnatic, and then there'll be all the other ones. All the fan bases will have their mini arguments on threads and shit. You just have fucking Stalingrad over here, like breaking all the records. TSM fans v Fnatic fans, just millions and millions of comments in droves. Yeah, I can imagine that. But fuck, what were we talking about? You're talking about D'Antonio. We were talking about top lane.
Yeah,
you were talking about Cries. Oh,
We were
yes.
talking about Cries, but top lane in Europe right now is like the worst pool in Europe.
Mhm.
Like all of the guys from last year who we were talking about being like potentially the next big top laners are still basically the only names that you would talk about. Like it's still Aggressivo, except now you have the addendum that he didn't look that good this split. You have Yoppa, but with the addendum that he didn't even get to play this split due to visa issues, you know? Cries was the only name that really came up and threatens to kind of upend that, right? People keep trying to say that sleeping, for example, and like I like
gets
sleeping
thrown in the conversation, right? Like Shemek's okay.
Shemek hasn't been thrown in the conversation like 2 years.
He hasn't really. I would understand if he was though, because like in terms of if we're talking about like the best top laners within a pool of these types of top laners, I would expect to hear his name at least a couple times.
Yeah, I mean,
why did Yoppa have visa problems again?
He's from Serbia, so him and Milica are both Serbian.
That actually does make sense.
Yeah, it's not technically a part of the EU, and they have to get visas. So and
for people who don't know, in CS:GO, actually, one of the guys who used to be one of the big analysts was from Serbia, and he used to have the same shit where, like, if he knew he was basically he could never accept an event like a week before. He had to like know he was going to go there like a month before, and then know he's not traveling for a week, and he can go and get. And then I think it's one of those ones where it takes like a whole fucking week or 2 weeks to get the visa. So actually, that sounds like that'll just kill his career dead.
Dude, the Vitality owner actually went on a show and talked about this. They actually they applied for the visas towards the end of October, but the first meeting between the two governments about the visa occurred on February the 20th. Wow. Like, it's insane. Like what are they supposed to do? Like, are they supposed to decide spring 2020's roster in fucking spring 2019? Like, what are they supposed to do? That was when the conversations began between the two governments. Like, that's insane to me. There's no good way out there. Like, I don't know. Like, that's the kind of thing that you need like a specific sports visa for, right? Like, exactly. you need some way to rush that through, because Yoppa and Milica, they haven't got an entire split of play right now. And Yoppa, if he got that split of play in the regional leagues, he'd by far look like the standout if he retained form. Otherwise, at least, unlike Aggressivo, I can't give the addendum, but he looked worse this split, so maybe it kind of worked out for him. But Milica, like, that definitely fucked him over. That fucked over the whole of Vitality for sure. It's part of why we were so lenient on them, right? Like, they had an unprecedented situation there, the visas.
Yeah, but I don't like. They have so many problems. I feel like Milica is not going to solve all of them. So
firing Jack Troll will solve all the ones that's fragging in Milica.
I mean, that's a big one, right? But even then, I still think there's way too many issues. Like, Skeens hasn't looked too good.
But how is Skeens supposed to develop on a roster like that, right? Like, what?
But it's like such a weird roster because it feels like no one is too bad in theory, but it just feels like they don't know what they're doing, right? It's not even that the players themselves look really, really bad. It's like they have no idea how to play out the game. So I'm not sure, unless like Milica is some shot calling god or really has like insane understanding of like map setups and what to do. And like they've had drafts, right, where they should just definitively win, and then they just kind of like sit there and lose fights.
I think what you're missing there is that they have to share scrims every week, because their only alternative is just to not use Milica at all for the entire split. So they haven't actually had a cohesive set of practices. And I think when they made the decision to move Steelback and Jack Troll onto like one day, that probably just exacerbated that issue. So they're not having the kind of productive scrims that every other team gets to have, because they have to scrim with like a theoretical roster that they may or may not be allowed to do next week, like, and they never get to know that until the last minute. So I think that will at least inhibit those kinds of conversations,
Yeah, but also I've seen a lot of teams have like split roster time and still be really successful in terms of developing. And there's like definitely things that you can learn or that your team can build off of from having like two different voices in one role in your team. So yeah, it's really hard to know exactly what's wrong with that team, but I would be kind of surprised if Milica coming and just fixes it.
So we are gonna flame Duke. Are we flaming Duke now? Are we flaming the staff? Is that open season?
I don't know if that's a flame the staff. Maybe Duke's doing everything right, and it's just like impossible. So I don't know.
You're asking an active coach right now, Veteran. Remember?
Oh shit! Yeah,
you're back out that world, but she's still in that world.
I mean, I would be tending to say that it's a coaching staff issue just because it feels like they don't understand what they're doing, right? But like, I can't definitively know what it is.
Well, here's my question for you, Veteran. Like, do you have any idea how it is that Jack Troll stayed on that team for so long? Because what I don't understand is, like, again, it's not like there wasn't any talented support. It's not the deepest pool, but it's not like there wasn't any. But what I never got is, like, as far as I know, in the rest of esports, Vitality is an org that has money. I mean, maybe in the past, I don't know currently what the situation is. No one knows with some of these orgs, but at least in the past, they definitely had money. Like some of the things they've done in other games. So presumably they chose to stick with this guy. So I don't know what the love of him is, basically.
Yeah, I mean, not only did they choose to stick with him, but they chose to stick with him specifically over sticking with Attila, which seems really in my eyes, because anyone who went over their laning phases could quite clearly see where the problems were coming from, and it wasn't Attila. Not to say Attila's a god, but he definitely wasn't the problem with that lane. They theoretically chose to stick with him over Jizuki, which is also a bit of a mind blower there. Jizuki admittedly didn't have as strong a split as his initial debut split. His initial debut split was like a shocker to a lot of people because it raised the obvious question of why wasn't this guy already in the EULCS? The answer to which being he's a massive arsehole in solo queue, so players didn't like to talk about him, so he didn't get picked up. So he had to force his way through promotion relegation, which is always going to be an issue in a franchise era, right? But
can you relate to him as a person? Similar path.
You know what? Okay, so this is like a complete aside, but you know what? I realized this a few weeks, and this was like the black pill moment a few weeks ago for me. It's like, I'm sorry, but hang on a second. The reason why Jizuki wasn't picked up wasn't just because like all of the players weren't talking about him because they were biased against him because he's a massive arsehole in solo queue, right? It was because, and the reason why like no one's picking up good scouts isn't just because there are bad scouts, because there's no incentive to be a good scout, because no org is actually looking for a scout, because no org actually gives a flying fuck about players they don't have to worry about unless someone else picks them up. Right? They don't actually give a flying fuck about all that stuff. They didn't give a flying fuck about it before. Why would they give a flying fuck about it now? Like, organizations don't have a vested interest in doing their scouting properly on the skill-based level. They have a vested interest in doing their scouting properly based on, I can actually sell this player to the public and make my money back. So why the fuck would they ever hire me? Why would there be good scouts? Because that implies there'll be a market for good scouts, and there just isn't. And there's no reason for there to be unless you add the threat that like Jizuki will come up and just fucking ream you again, or a leader will just auto-qualify, and he would have already auto-qualified if the Misfits Premier roster being allowed to qualify straight up. Like, if these guys could actually threaten your spot in the league, then maybe they have a best interest in doing that, but you've eliminated that, so why would that ever happen again? But anyway, on the Jack Troll thing, there's been there's been a ridiculous rumor that's completely unsubstantiated behind the scenes that that Jack Troll's family invested in Vitality itself. I actually tried to find evidence of it, and I couldn't find evidence of it. But this just goes to show you how mind-blowing it is to the wider community.
The fact people are reaching for theories like that.
To clarify, you said that they chose Jack Troll over Jizuki and Attila. Like, allegedly, there was some conflict between them, right? Yeah. So it was less of a like we threw all of our money into Jack Troll and couldn't afford Jizuki and Attila, and more of a they actually actively didn't want to play together. I think.
It was like him or me. Yeah. That was implied.
But I will say, like, on the scouting topic, I think a lot of orgs will look at budget as like, okay, we're spending so much money on these really, really high salaries for players, and now we have to discuss like what is our staff budget. So no one really hires a dedicated staff, but now it's even gotten to the point where like they're cutting players' salary budgets and they're just picking up new talent, right? So theoretically, you had two choices, right? You throw all your money at the players and just pick the known quantities and the guys that are already stars, or you invest in like lower salary players plus like good staff to help bring them up and scout like the next big thing, like all these sorts of things. So like those are theoretically the two options. The problem is, one is like the staff aren't necessarily guaranteed to be good. And then two, now it's like we're cutting out like all of the excess fat. We're just hiring like Aroma, Shadow, Humanoid, Karzi, Kaiser rosters, right? So yeah, I'm not sure. It's really an interesting question of like why teams don't actively hire scouts, because there's so many teams that just don't have a scout position, right?
I mean,
So
this year I was consulted more than any other year, but that's because teams ran out of money. Simple. Ran out of money. Origin is running out of money right now as well. Like this is the last big money Origin. Huh?
Do you charge though?
On one of them, I will admit that I didn't, and then on two of them, I did. But one of them, I will admit that I didn't. But Origin are also bleeding money right now. Right? Origin are bleeding money straight up right now. And this is the last like big kind of money Origin roster that you'll get, and even then they sort of admit that they skimped a little in certain areas that will be obvious to anyone with half a brain, right? But the only reason that you're seeing rookies out there now is because they're hemorrhaging money. But the inherent risk that if they don't choose the right people, they will suddenly get demoted doesn't really exist. Like there is technically a clause where if they finish bottom like multiple splits in a row, then their thing will go up for auction. But that's if they finish literally last multiple splits in a row, and none of them are really.
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme condition. Because obviously it was one they didn't want to have to invoke almost under any circumstances, as you were alluding. They just put it in there so it sounds like there's a thing. And even then, by the way, if you read the wording, I believe it's even phrased as like they can do that. They don't even have to. So like you just know that like it would be the last possible thing they'd ever do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean. They definitely probably wouldn't want to do that as part of. I mean, we've actually seen them being really lenient on something. There's something that everybody is waiting for, and I don't think if you know about this, Thorin. But one big thing everyone's waiting for is to do with Origin specifically. Origin haven't had an academy team the entire split, which actually was made mandatory. And what I've been told is that Riot are helping them try to secure one right now for next split. But no one's heard anything about Origin's supposed next split lineup. And if they don't actually have one, then that's going to be a big issue for all of the other orgs. Because that's just money that Origin don't have to spend. They haven't had to spend it this split. That's already a big deal.
It's actually crazy because I'm imagining like the NA equivalent would be that we have an academy league with 9 teams just randomly, right?
Yes.
Like an org just not having an academy team is really strange. Like obviously that just creates in the EU system, it just creates a league where another non-LEC org has a team. I assume. Actually, I haven't even looked at the logistics of that. Like, did the Spanish league run with fewer teams?
Boy. So no.
Or did they have like an extra team that now has to go out so Origin can join?
No, BCN. So Origin kind of like outsourced to an org called BCN that they helped to fund. The BCN team itself still remained, but they were like really desperate for sponsors when it happened. There's a really famous tweet longer now from one of the BCN guys, because basically they lost everything when Origin backed out. The guy actually had packed up like everything and was ready to straight move. He actually didn't have a place to live immediately after the thing happened. He'd sold all of his furniture and everything at that point, and he had to vacate the place soon. And then he was told Origin aren't there anymore. You can very easily find this tweet longer. But yeah, like the BCN organization itself did then continue to play, and they played online on that tournament, but they didn't do very well because suddenly all of their living situations were upended. They didn't really have a gaming house, they didn't really have the funds, blah blah blah. Yeah, it really fucking sucks for everyone involved, and it was a super last minute decision by Origin that seems really fucking shady to me, and no one really stepped in to do anything about it. That's what
I was actually surprised that this was not a bigger deal, because I remember it coming out and being like, wow, if I were in the scene right now, I would make such a big deal about this, right? Like, as in if I were like still writing articles and doing commentary, I would make such a big deal about this, because this is ridiculous, like that Origin doesn't have an academy team.
So I did a stream about it, and this particular aspect may have some obvious ramifications, but I'll just say it anyway. The reason that a big deal was made of it is because the Reddit thread got deleted. The Reddit thread just got straight up deleted.
Of course. Thank you.
So,
Reddit.
It was like,
Was it reported by Travis Gafford Industries?
Actually, oh fuck, I forgot about that.
You should have got it corroborated by the man himself.
Yeah, forgot about that. Isn't there like a thing now? Like this wasn't the case at the time, but there's like a thing now where you can't post stuff on Reddit unless you're an organization or something now, right?
Yeah, I did not understand that. Which is like,
it's weird how that works, isn't it? Because it's almost like it would stop people like me, someone else who they wouldn't want, isn't it? Like, you stop all the key people who don't want to do the actual article, don't you?
Yeah, no, it's weird that it's strange that like there's a loophole for Horizon, which is essentially the exact same thing as Travis Gaffa's industry.
It is. That's the joke. People. And by the way, you know the crazy thing? Fair play to Ashley Kang because she tricked everyone. No one knew until like she did a show with me or something where she revealed like, no, the Horizon just is me. Like I actually like own it. Like it's just a name I made for. But that's the thing. The joke. The joke is
Korean people won't let her in, right?
Yeah, but the joke is, as you're saying there, implying, when they referenced that in the post, they made it sound like, you know, they're like the Korean ESPN or something. It's like, no, it's just one person. Like, that actually goes against the premise, the precedent you're setting, literally.
No, because it's like, I thought, like, in my assumption was that this would hurt her brand, right? Because in the West, it's like, if you're not associating that with your brand, then it just cuts down on like all the work that you're doing. But she's actually made it run like almost both ways. She's found like the perfect setup where she's Ashley Kang in situations where she has to have a personality and be on talk shows and have like her own brand, and then she's Horizon in situations where it benefits her, which is like really cool actually.
Yeah.
So she's actually just really genius. I'm impressed, and obviously this isn't to like diss her because I think she actually works really hard and does good work. But I'm just like.
To clarify,
no, it just makes sense in the context of the post. Yeah.
To clarify, the only tangible difference between why she's allowed and Travis Gafford's not allowed is because she didn't name her org after herself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, by the way, can I just say as an aside, that's not the only reason not to name your org after yourself, Travis. But it is delicious fucking tea. So, you know, if you did it yourself, mate, I'd have named it something else.
Fucking hell, actually.
Just saying, you know.
Wait, and also to wait. So because like I swear I was paying attention, but just to clarify, you're also saying so she chose the name Horizon because presumably the LCK wouldn't let her in unless she was representing an org, right?
Yes. So, yeah, the LCK press room has like, rules where you have to have like org representation.
Okay.
Or teams like won't trust you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's actually like gamed them and inadvertently gamed Reddit at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually pretty baller. There you go. Travis, grow some balls, and then there you go.
By the way,
then you can get in. It's that simple. Grow some balls.
As a quick aside, even though I haven't been there, obviously now for years and years, like I left, I think in like early 2016. I will say, like Korea lasted like that for a long time. By the way, where it's not like the West, where like you know, like because we have Reddit and we have all this, like we have this. It's a fictional community, but we have this community online that feels like it's the community, but really it's just like the people who are famous and are just the people like Reddit knows, right? Because that doesn't exist in Korea. Like, for example, if I asked people, like, name 5 Korean journalists, you can't even name more than Ashley Kang. That's it. Like, it's over already.
So, like that too, for sure. Like,
so as a result, though, that still applies. Like, it's the name that you represent in terms of your org is more important than your name. Because when I was there, Monty would do that thing where he would, like, think he could just say to like super famous Korean people like, this is Thorin, hello, and then I could just see like, dude, you can just see like there's no like flicker in their eyes, like you could have said anything there. You could have just said like, this is fucking Charlie Chaplin. They'd be like, hello Charlie, well I've got to go now. It's like, you know, like he thought that was going to be my in, and it's like, and obviously the other joke is, I mean, to be fair, I told this story before, this actually happened to me with the Overwatch League. When I went to the opening of the Overwatch League, because even though the people who worked at the Overwatch League, the staff, were in esports, they were just people who played games or the game Overwatch. So when I was trying to get like my press access, they just kept asking over and over again, no, what was the name again though? And the most hilarious part is, behind me in this queue were like all the like low-level shitter journalists who've never made it but who were like trying to hop on Overwatch. But obviously they all had orgs veterans, so they were getting in with the press access.
Yeah.
And then basically the sickest thing about it was, obviously, if I'll just give people one little glimpse behind the curtain. Obviously, in real life, I wouldn't do this, which is the problem. But the only way I would have gotten away with it if I hadn't have, like, actually just called Monty and the rest of them is I should have basically just done that thing where I'm like, don't you know who I am? But obviously, I would never actually do that in real life because that's so unreasonable, isn't it? Like, you just keep asking and hope the manager or whatever comes and brings the fucking pass.
Or just make up your own organization. And
no, because this is the problem. They kept saying, like, oh, so what do you do? And I was like, oh, I have a YouTube channel. They were like, this isn't really for vloggers though. And I was like, well, that's cute and everything, but I'm not really a vlogger. I do like interviews and stuff there. And they were like, yeah. Well, the thing is, there will be chances for fans to come. They were actually doing that straight onto my face too. It was amazing. And obviously, I was already primed to hate the Overwatch League, even though Monty was working for it. Like I told him before he went there, like, this is shit, fuck this. But anyway, whatever. It's by the by. Let's skip to another team then now. I think what we do is this. So we don't bore people by going through all the bad teams first. We'll just go wherever we please. So I want to do this. One premise we thought of for this show is not only can we discuss, flaws in a team, potential upgrades, but if there's an example where, let's be real, they're not going to make a change, and maybe they can't even, we can just spitball like a hypothetical or what you would want differently. That's a fun way to do it if necessary. Okay. So I'm just going to go straight into the Lions den on this one, Veteran, which is this. In light of how the final of the split went, what does Fnatic change? If it doesn't have to be a player, how do they overcome this? Do they just wait for Riot to change the meta? What do they do to overcome it? It's not like it's the end of the world. They only lost one match, but it's the way they lost it and some of the things that we discussed on, actually, I'm mixing up my shows. On the Crackdown, actually, I think we had an interesting discussion about this topic where basically Jankos implied that, like, even the way that the side choice went made it like obvious that like G2 would win, because basically like G2 was going to pick, I think, blue every time. And I think have I got it the wrong way around there? I think maybe
G2 had red every time.
That's it. G2 wanted red every time because they didn't need to like ban all the shit. And then basically he also implied Fnatic would have had to take blue anyway because they have to basically try and first pick a champion for one of their players who has the limited champion pool. So if you make it sound like that, as I said to Jankos at the time, it's like, dude, when I want to believe these are two teams equally as good, you can't tell me that one of them has champions they play but aren't comfortable playing on stage, and the other one plays champions on stage that they never even played before. Like, if I hear that that's the scenario, then the one that's playing the champions that don't ever play before wins, I kind of lose a bit of faith that the other one can be the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing about red side versus blue side is that Fnatic's players just don't play for lane, right? So if you're picking red side, you have more opportunities to counter lane matchups, and then you can play like really aggressively for lane theory. I think that we talked about Nemesis. I'm not sure if it was before the show or after, where he just kind of like seeds pressure in every lane and picks like a scaling champion. You can do that on blue side, just blind pick your mid laner, right? It doesn't really matter what you're picking. You're just going to play the same way. Sure. So I feel that that's like the idea of blue side versus red side. You're just going to pick compositionally champions you're comfortable on. Don't really care about what you're against. Feel like you can just survive to a point where you can fight or set up the map however you want, and then and play out the game like that. I think if you approach G2 like that, you're always going to lose. So it's kind of.
I mean, I think you can early rotate mid lane on both sides anyway. Like, you either get a Zir or you don't get a Zir, in which case you're not going to be playing for priority, realistically speaking. So like, it's for me that
was banned every game too. So
I'm trying to take like a different approach to this, because the really obvious approach would be to say, you know what, leader is playing a Zir right now. You can probably nab him, and let's be real, this guy actually does a lot with priority. So if you want to change up playstyle, there is a way that you can go about this. You'll initially dip, but you will definitely peak harder than you've ever peaked before. But the other way to go is that there's another thing that's kind of gone undiscussed, mostly because we talked with like mid laners and junglers and all of these people who think they're all that hot shit. What we haven't really talked about is that the big thing G2 recognized when they recognized that they could early rotate Azir, etc., and that it was basically just based around if you got that champion or not, you can counterpick support. And a big thing that we've talked about beforehand is that if we don't see this guy on Rakan, he hasn't been the Hillisang that we know and love last split. But what no one's really talking about is that the actual sleeper OP pool that multiple people have been pushing, myself included, with like Lulu, with Bard, etc., is definitely nowhere near Hillisang's capacity. And this is obviously the epitome of playing for lane, right?
By the way, did you actually hear, I don't know if you heard this, but I think they've said it on all the shows, so maybe you have. But basically, the joke is the G2 players wanted Reckless to have Aphelios just because then it would mean that Hylissang would be on Tahm Kench. So it was like, just give it up. Just give him it so that then Hylissang's just out of the game, basically. Which is like, that's actually depressing when you hear that, dude.
Like, they had a genuinely good lane into it, though. Like, Kog'Maw is actually genuinely a really good pick into that. Like, it's genuinely so strong.
I remember 2018. MSI, when everyone was like shitting on Reckless's champ pool, right? I think it was because he played, I forget what it, like he was playing Sivir Ezreal.
Perma.
Yeah, and then people like definitely Sivir also. Like there was a lot of weird picks, and then people were saying like he has such a shit pool. But I just remember no one calls out this guy for only playing Braum and Rakan.
Yes.
And I felt like even though he had a good season last year, it was more because like less of his mechanical aptitude on champions, and it was more about just what he knows how to do with prio lanes or what to do with like around the map.
Yes.
So I've always felt that Hylissang's champ pool is like really limited. So counterpick support against Fnatic is going to be useful because again, like Reckless is going to be one of your better players, but he's going to be sort of chained by whatever support pool Fnatic can feasibly play, and if G2 just plays to counter it, then that's really good for them. So.
Thing is, if I transpose Fnatic onto red side in the series, and I have G2 on blue side in that series, the area of the draft where I end up having the most issues is not in trying to get Nemesis to blind Azir, or in trying to get Nemesis to play an Azir counter, albeit like he for some weird reason was avoiding Corki. LeBlanc doesn't become my biggest issue at that point. My biggest issue is when I come to 5th pick and realize that I can't counter pick bot lane. That actually becomes my biggest issue. With Fnatic. So that's another thing that really has to be considered. And the issue is that there are metas where Hylissang will just be the MVP straight up, right? Like we've all seen him because his understanding of the map is fucking ridiculous. It was so ridiculous that people were getting angry at us for saying that Boxer wasn't good because, you know, how the fuck can Fnatic possibly have this level of map control in the early game? Like, how is that possible without a good jungler? You know, forgetting that Hylissang is literally like Atlas with the whole fucking world on his shoulders that entire split, you know? But in this meta, where you do actually want to be playing for lane...
Or you have a jungler named Selfmade as well, who, you know, does a lot of...
Yeah, now you have a jungler named Selfmade. Yeah, but now you have a jungler named Selfmade. The pros of having Hylissang on your roster are kind of... Do you really need a support that can take over the entire map? Or do you need a support that can, especially in the meta that we're shifting towards, maintain lane priority? Hylissang doesn't even pick those champions, you know? That's an issue that a lot of people aren't really talking about right now. And Selfmade is a fucking god. So, you know, just always keep him no matter what you do with the rest of the roster. Selfmade for me is the most important part of that roster right now. Selfmade and then Reckless are the most important parts of that.
I mean,
roster.
I'll give you a good reason why, mate, is because one thing that's weird about Fnatic is they have, like, except for Selfmade, the other 4 players have such ridiculously defined idiosyncrasies that, like, can completely make them, like, a fatal flaw to them specifically. But then you look at those 4 players and it's in totally different ways. Like, Bwipo and Hylissang, it's going way too aggressive at times and just basically looking like you're inting. But then because the other 2 are way too passive at times, that almost, like, evens out in some fucked manner. And then as a result, then you just got Selfmade, who's just a normal human being. Like, can I just play League of Legends? And so the problem is, I do feel like on the one hand, they sort of cover each other's weaknesses, which kind of is cool. But that's actually bad for shows like this, because it means when you cover someone's weakness, a fan will just think the weakness doesn't exist. And then it will get exposed, as we see here. A meta will come, a team will come that can expose it. And then it's not like we don't want to have to say for like 50 episodes that someone's not that good. And then at the end find out like, you were right. It's like, well, what do I win from that? I was saying at 50 episodes, you know, you want it to just get fixed immediately or just own it, you know, live with it.
And the way that Fnatic dealt with it before, right, is that it's like we have a player who plays like Rakan, Tom, Braum. Okay, great. 2 of those champions have insane level 1s. Let's just drill level 1 strategies over and over again, and we'll always have an advantage like that. And then we don't actually have to play hard and aggressively for lane. But I don't think this iteration of the Fnatic roster does it anymore, just based on watching their games. So you see a lot more of the holes that were kind of covered up by the fact that they would already go into the game having an advantage from level 1.
Because like, listen, this is just pure spitball and speculation. I haven't talked to the guys. I'm not claiming to have any inside info on this. But that has to be something to do with coaching change, right? Because Youngbuck, obviously, at this point in time, is like fucking legendary for some of the band-aid fixtures he's done. Meanwhile, from my experiences in the past with Mithy very much is like a guy who's trying to like reach for perfection and play like an ideal game. And so I would imagine if he faces limitations, it's like I said, when some players came on the crackdown, they were basically complaining that like, I think, it was when I did Summon Insight, and Sven, who obviously still talks to Mithy, the guys from C9, was basically saying that like Mithy was kind of like exasperated with some of the support problems they have. That's the difference. I feel like Youngbuck does what Kelsey says there. He's like, right, I've only got these pieces to work with. What can I do? Mithy's just sort of like, well, shit, I can't even do what I wanted to do now. This guy just can't do it. So fuck, what do I do?
I mean, this is actually a pretty big debate, I guess, when it comes to coaching. No one really kind of acknowledges that this is essentially the debate that's going on, but do you really care more about being able to get these 5 people to function properly as a winning team, or do you care about trying to aspire to playing the most perfect game of League of Legends possible? The fact of the matter is you don't need to play perfect League of Legends to win the World Championships. You need to play better League of Legends than your opponents at every stage. That's actually a different thing. Youngbuck is probably better at doing that. Miffy is probably better if your aspiration is to one day play the perfect game of League of Legends, but you will miss so many championships in trying to do that. Youngbuck will tailor and band-aid where he needs to band-aid to beat the immediate next opponent, and that's honestly the kind of guy that you want to win you championships, and that's the kind of coaching that, and it will trigger a lot of people, is actually fucking useful. Like the other ones is one where you will always have a really nice excuse for why you lost, but Youngbuck's approach is instead to just win. It's
really interesting because obviously I'm someone who works in academy, so the debate in my league about like how important winning now is more like it's bigger, right?
Sure.
Because you have the idea of aspirational play, which is more like how do I can I teach or like get these players to lean into their weaknesses and get better at them, right? By making them play stuff that they're not going to be instantly good at. So I feel like that's more kind of what they're trying to do. But it's hard to do that when you're like the problem with doing that is like a lot of people say, okay, why are you constantly just playing stuff that you can already do? Your style is one-dimensional. And this is why LPL is actually so successful right now, is because LPL is like the king of we will just play one way. Like every single successful LPL team just plays one fucking way, right? And so people will criticize that and say, but like your style is exploitable, all these other factors, but you have to get someone who is good at playing like the counter style to your style too, and better at playing that than you are to actually beat them, right? So this idea that if everyone is playing like their what works for them and doing it to the best way possible, then like that kind of situation that you fall into might be a situation that occurs, but it's not going to be like the most common one. But the problem is, I guess, like if you're trying to teach the other way, the aspirational way of developing players, teaching them more stuff so that eventually they can play more styles, is that you kind of run into a morale issue, right? Initially, if you're doing that, you're going to lose a lot more. So then players will feel like they suck, or they don't have to, or they don't want to work as hard, or they're not getting as much out of it. So you lose a lot of the kind of momentum that you could otherwise have. So you kind of have to find a balance of, do I teach these guys stuff that will actually be really good for them long run, or do I just like continuously hone and focus what they're already good at?
One thing you referenced there, by the way, that's like a quite a high scale concept, that actually a high resolution concept rather, that basically applies across nearly all games as far as team games, is what you just said there, that the reason why it doesn't necessarily matter if you can execute whatever the one thing you can do to a high degree is because what are the odds the other person can execute the counter to the same high degree, especially if it's not how they play anyway, because it's actually a very common concept in Counter-Strike. We call it an anti-strat because a strat's where it's the tactic that you use, you know. There's been plenty of infamous examples where someone tunnel visioned way too much on the anti-strat, and as a result, you know what, on paper, they had the game plan to destroy this guy, but they didn't have the personnel or like the actual like basically technical ability to execute it. And in fact, if you'd have just played the normal way that you'd have played, you'd have maybe had a better chance because you'd have played to your strengths. So I do agree that like basically that's the difference between doing like simulation versions of a game where everyone plays it out correctly. Probably the most triggering term of all time to me, because just playing it out correctly, what you mean, just play the game? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I never understood when people like Hotshot GG said that. It works if you just play it out correctly. Like, well, yeah, if you make every move in the game correctly, you win. Like, what does that even mean? Like, you've made never put. You know, it's a lot of people put the word just where it's like totally inappropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, I like for me, the biggest regrets in my career strategically have always been when I've said, okay, we'll use this game to try something new, or we will use this game to try to like push something different, because then it's turned into an uncontrollable snowball of morale, kind of like Kelsey is saying. And there have been multiple instances of it where it's like, well, this thing is only going to be available for this meta. This thing isn't technically a correct way to play. It's actually abusable, blah, blah, blah. And that's always ended up being having like a snowball effect. Like those have always been kind of my biggest regrets strategically. As a coach, and I don't feel like Young Bucks ever had that kind of choice presented to him. I feel like Young Bucks always figured this is the best way for my team to win the immediate next game, and then has found other ways, like his now kind of famous mini lectures, to talk about the other kinds of concepts, right, and to introduce other cohesive ways to play the game. And I think that's the best way to do things.
There's also even an element, I mean, you could probably speak to this, Kelsey, where pro players, I always tell people this, I know pro players seem silly when they say certain things, but that's because they really do live in the day-to-day. Like, they're like trying to win the game today, and then tomorrow they're going to worry about tomorrow's game. So it's so hard to convince a pro player to have the macro view of the game. It's the reason why, as an extreme example, it doesn't surprise me that Forgiven lost his shit and just literally left on like week 4 or whatever. Because yes, to you or I, it's like, dude, just play out the other 5 weeks. No, to him, that was like a lifetime. That was like a prison sentence that he'd never get out of. So the problem is this. If you tell the guy, listen, you can give him the best speech of all time about, listen, you're going to need to play weak side now because we need to develop that side of your game, and this is going to help us in the future. All he's going to hear is like, why am I being punished? Like, if you just give me this carry champion, I'll win the game. Like, can't I just do that? So it's so hard to get the buy-in, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like a lot of times players will just tunnel vision on like their immediate role has a lead, right? If their immediate role has a lead, they know how to win the game. If their mid laner has a lead and they don't know how the fuck to win the game, right? Like if you're talking about an AD carry, it's like, I don't play mid. What is that shit? Like, I don't have a lead. I suck. I don't want to fight, right? So if your team dynamic relies a lot on like your top laner having a lead, and then it doesn't work out for him, he's not going to be able to like make the mental adjustments to know how to play out the game when someone who's on a champion he's never played before, or on a role he doesn't play in solo queue has a lead, how to win the game when that happens. Like, it's a really weird kind of idea as well.
To circle it back though, what are the actual thoughts about what Fnatic could do? And if there isn't one, let's do a hypothetical. So like, what type of a player would you want to replace whoever you choose?
So like a lot of the praise and I don't want to point to Hylissang too much, but I think a lot of his utility, as we pointed out, was from having like a jungler who wasn't super useful. I mean, he was useful, but didn't control the map in the way that he wanted. And he covered a lot of those weaknesses. But as a support himself, he does have a lot of existing holes, right? So then you talk about the existing support pool and who would you replace him with? Like, this is a roster that I feel like could have rookie support and develop him well. It's just like finding the correct one. So that's an option that you can take. I know you guys are going to immediately go to the mid pool because there's just a larger mid pool in your
of course.
So yeah.
And there's just more obvious stars there who would, do exactly what you want. That presumably many people would say Nemesis don't. I don't know. I said many people. Everyone's a bloody Fnatic fan. They think he's awesome. So enjoy those silver medals, guys. Just fucking enjoy those silver medals. This guy is going to be the Silver Surfer. I'm telling you. So just get ready.
Fnatic Rising has Bravado, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend Bravado.
He was good for a while. I haven't watched him.
He's been kind of disappointing me recently, though. Okay. Like, and he knows that. Like, I mean, the guy is basically a turret one show right now. I mean, the name that immediately came to my mind was actually Stillback. Like, Stillback can actually do it all, and he can also control the map if he has to. And
basically do what Hylissang does, except maybe play more champs.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready for a reality in which like the player that Reckless replaces is now his lane partner 5 years later. That's just something. Just at that point in time, I actually am just dead, and this is like the last drain of consciousness out of my mind was the last 5 years, and my esports career was clearly fake, and I was just like, none of this happened.
Otherwise, why not Mystiques? Like, why not
Mystiques? Labrov is going to be a thing, right?
Yeah, Labrov is going to be a thing for sure.
Yeah.
Labrov, though, like the only issue that I would have is that, as far as we know, Hylissang does all the talking. And actually, if we do listen to Fanatics comms, it is basically just Hylissang and Whippo talking nonsense.
I have a question about that.
Dead silence.
So obviously,
maybe Hylissang is still like useful.
He
has extra implied value. Yes, than if you've seen the server,
which is why Steelback comes to mind.
I wanted to ask you about that actually. When they released that video. Like, dude, I'm actually shocked at that. Like, here's the thing. On the one hand, if they really meant it in the way it was received, props to Fnatic. Like, I actually am amazed they'd release something that would kind of show some of the flaws of their team like that. But I could not believe it when I watched that Veteran, because there's only two options if you listen to that video. Either Hylissang is a terrible communicator and he's just, like, baiting his team into fights they would lose, or the other alternative, which obviously I secretly want to be real, which is he's trying to get a fucking, he's like out there in the park trying to get a squirrel to come to him with a fucking knot, like, come on, buddy, come on. And he knows if he makes it. It's like these guys just won't fight. So where would you come down on that end of the, obviously it's a spectrum, it's not literally a binary option, you know, but where would you come down that? Because when I was watching that, listen, I'm not an expert in terms of which fights to take, etc. But I did feel as though sometimes, like, they were just doing that shit, which is, I've always said this, the thing I've always hated the most about League of Legends, and because Koreans play correctly, they're the ones that do it the most, is where you start sort of like a skirmish that becomes a team fight, and then because you're Korean, you calculate, like, well, we only have a 41% chance of winning this team fight, and so you just, like, slowly back out, let one guy die, and then the rest just run away. And then if you do that, like, 10 times in one game, at the end of the game, I'm like, the fucking blue balls on this game, like, what is this? Like, you have to take a fight eventually, guys. You can't just only take optimal fights. But so where are we coming down on this now that we actually got to hear the comms?
I mean, where I come down on it is that only Whippo and Hylissang are talking about Winterfight, and Hylissang doesn't even understand all the champions in his own pool. How the fuck is he supposed to understand champions in everyone else's pool? But everyone else is a fucking dead mute, so who the fuck else is going to be calling it? And probably the guy that's engaging. Like, yeah, maybe Hylissang doesn't necessarily have the game knowledge to be able to call optimal fights 24/7. But, you know, right now it seems, unless it's him or Whippo calling it, no one is really calling it there. Sure. Everyone else kind of plays Capcom in those scenarios, by which I mean that they will say, this is not a fight that I can take because I don't have this up, right? They'll say, like, I don't have ult or something like this, but they're other than that, like, that I mean, what choice do you have right now? Mystiques and Steelback both also communicate, which is why I named both of those. They're both actually very big communicators, and that's why I didn't immediately jump to Labrov, who's usually my go-to. If we want to fix pool and grab someone who's a better communicator, we wanted those two. Otherwise, you're just giving Whippo even more of a job, and I can only imagine it would be horrible for Selfmade trying to gank bot with a completely mute support. I've been in teams where both bot laners have been mute before, and my god, that basically just becomes a black hole as far as jungle is concerned. You just don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, and then I guess, like, Nemesis not talking, if neither jungler or mid are talking either, then that's a problem on Fnatic.
I mean, when Nemesis talks, the most stuff that Nemesis says is like a question. Like, he'll ask if we can do something now, right? Or
can we go to Drake now? We can't. It always sounds like he's he's just took too much, like, sleep medication or something. He's just annoyed.
Yeah, but
he's got insomnia.
I mean, like, that's one of the biggest deaths to a team too, is that if you have a mid jungle and neither of them talk, because they're the most, like, active on the map and who are going to be present in every interaction theoretically. Like, everything almost goes through mid. So,
but it's mostly like information that he gives rather than like commands. Quite clearly, there are only two people giving commands, which is kind of surprising because people probably have figured Selfmade would be stepping up to give commands as well. But as far as I can tell, outside of early game, he doesn't really.
Dude, that triggers me though, because here's the problem.
Outside of early game, most junglers don't know what the fuck they're doing, so it's fine.
Like, the problem I have with this scenario though is, like, first of all, the guy literally played with you already in the fucking national scene. So it's not like it's a guy you don't know. In theory, you should know this guy intimately in terms of, like, how his mind works, how he wants to play the game. So in theory, if you're Nemesis, he's another tool for you to use to yourself succeed in the game, and then your team from that once you have gotten leads, etc. Instead, he really does do that thing where it's like, this is why I actually feel like, it sounds like a fucked up thing to say, but I almost feel like Nemesis's association with the LS is actually a bad thing for his career. Because unfortunately, like, that's exactly the sort of person I wouldn't want as, like, a mentor for him, because LS is the guy who is very much in the theoretical world of, like, well, this would have worked if we would have done this. And so if you have that mentality, That's why you're never going to do anything.
I mean,
you're going to be paralyzed by inaction.
I mean, I'm worried about that, and also the fan base itself that basically has deluded themselves into thinking that Nemesis is a player they.
They just prop him up bizarrely, don't they? I don't get it.
Yeah. So Leader, for example. So if I discuss with Leader, and I've even on this show in the past have pointed out that yes, his champ pool is a demonstrable issue, and it will be gating him in the future. He doesn't say I don't have a champ pool issue. He says, okay, but this works really, really well for me right now. I can counter most of the meta champions and force my playstyle in most scenarios. He'll do arguments like that. When we say this thing about Nemesis, admittedly, Nemesis doesn't ever want to appear on talk shows and shit, so it's difficult to say this to him directly. But the arguments we get back are he doesn't have champ pool issues. In fact, he's a champion ocean. It's like arguing like there is that theory in debating where if you just drag them all the way to the other end, right? So say that their argument is here, you drag them to the other side of crazy.
End up in the middle,
then you'll end up in the middle of reasonable and crazy, right? Which is still fucking crazy, it's weeks of shades of that. But the worrying thing for me is that given that he doesn't really go out of his way to kind of get confronted on this kind of stuff, I do worry he'll end up in an echo chamber where he does convince he doesn't have a champion pool issue. He just genuinely believes LeBlanc can't work right now, even though it's demonstrably false. And the other guy that we had on here, Featherman, who said LeBlanc is actually really counterable in this meta, perma-pick LeBlanc because he has a brain and can see it actually works anyway, because people don't understand how to play around it. This guy is using his brain, and he doesn't use this as an excuse to continue his crutch, right? I just worry about the echo chamber maybe affecting Nemesis' future career.
Most great players I've talked to, so not just good or decent or whatever, but great players I've talked to are really kind of self-aware of their flaws, but don't care because everyone else is shit.
Yes.
So that's Leader. That's what I call the UZI syndrome, because he was the first player that I really talked to who had that mentality, right? Where it's well, yeah, okay, I do this, and I know I do this, and this is why we play with Pekko instead of me and all this shit. But you know what? I don't care because this is how I win the game.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, they can at least accept the flaws in their playstyle, even if they think that they can overcome them in other ways, and even if they are aware it could gate them in the future, they probably feel like they would just gate themselves more if they gave it up. And obviously, Leader has now moved into the ranged mages, God forbid. So obviously you can expand in that regard. I just worry that the way that he is right now, kind of refusing to get challenged and falling with crowds that will not challenge him, I do worry about that aspect in his future. And I don't know how Miffy fits into all this. I have no clue how Miffy fits into all of this. Sure. And I have no clue how Young Buck fit into all this, but when we had Young Buck last time on the show, he definitely wasn't saying anymore that Nemesis doesn't have an issue in this regard, right? In fact, he said he could plan around that particular issue. So quite clearly he did see it there. And the last time we saw Nemesis play Assassin effectively, admittedly it was giga broken at the time, but it was a Kali and it was under Young Buck's tenure. So you can do this, but you probably just have to remove him from the circle before it's too late,
The thing I don't get though is, like I alluded to there, this has always been a really big confusion for me, is what I never get is the people who are diehard stans, and then you're like, right, well, let me load up a fucking game with the person this guy's a stan of, because, here's the difference, right? I could, as mad as this sounds, I could understand someone who's a delusional fan of Bwipo, because when Bwipo works, it looks fucking sick. It looks like he knows, oh, wow, if he's doing these aggressive moves and they work, he must actually really know what he's doing. He must have a great sense for the matchup. This is cool. Look at this action I'm getting. What I don't get about people who are fans of, Nemesis is, do you just like watching paint dry or something? What the fuck are you enjoying watching? You're already enjoying the nameplate.
Oh my god, it's the same.
We've come back to it again. You're just watching the nameplate, for fuck's sake. Don't you want to see something in the game? Do you want to just see someone, do you want to just see a Kassadin down by 15 CS and go, all right, this will be fun, I guess, if he doesn't die. What are you enjoying?
You know what they enjoy? This is a really nice way to kind of bring things full circle, even though obviously the episode's nowhere near over yet. But what they enjoy is a sure bet. and they can defend Nemesis because Nemesis is on the top 2 team. How the fuck can you say that Nemesis is like a 5th at best mid laner if he's on the top 2 team for him? It's the fucking Broxer defenders again. Yes. They defend because they can go against the so-called clever intellectual analysts and actually be correct. Why? Because they can just bring up to everyone else who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. This guy's on the top 2 teams. Obviously, he's top 2. You know, like that's what it is. They allow them. They can convince themselves that they are correct, and
that's why the saddest thing. Yeah. The saddest thing about the Broxer issue specifically is Broxer actually had. There's no personal component there. Like I think people can guess already. Even before I actually really disliked the style of play, I already sort of like Nemesis's personality rubs me the wrong way. Like I hate people who are whiners like that, especially when it's like you whine and it's like, well, you're not fucking doing anything. Why are you whining for fuck's sake? Like sit down and let the other people play the game and get carried by Hillsang, right? So my problem basically is, where was I going with that? Wait there 1 second. Let me think. What was it? Oh, this is the problem basically is. At least in the Broxer one, he seems like a really cool guy. Like, actually, every scenario I've seen him, he seems like a nice guy. I've seen him even in some, like, private settings where he seemed pretty fucking legit. So it's not that I want him to fail. It's just that the aspects in the game mean he's doomed to. Like, and especially, by the way, if he doesn't address the things that people are bringing up. Like, that's his best chance to succeed. So the difference is, in that scenario, I didn't want him to fail. But if I take that out of my mind for a second, the idea that he does go and then fail in Team Liquid, simultaneous to Selfmade on the failed SK, then making it in Fnatic and looking awesome. That is like the ultimate Schadenfreude / fuck you to the fans who all said that those 2 things were the opposite. And obviously, the ultimate delicious cherry on the top is it was Fnatic fans themselves who said it before they knew they'd be getting self-made. They were the very ones saying, how can you say Broxer isn't the best and you're telling me self-made is good on a bad team, the worst in Europe? It's like the idea you guys are the ones who then have to be like, well, pull out the old men in black tool there. Actually, self-made is amazing. Like, that's the ultimate Schadenfreude. Like, we even made these fucks, like, reverse position completely.
Yeah. I mean, the best stuff that we have heard that Broxer brought to a team was that he was very good for morale. Like he was very good at bigging everyone up when they were in game and stuff. And all that stuff was very useful. And that's immediately what I've heard about him in Team Liquid. He was helping Doublelift and Doublelift's having hard times. You know, he's still doing all that stuff. But our opinion of him as a jungler is unchanged. So he's a very nice guy. He's apparently a famously nice guy. But like,
the other thing is people in media really like Broxer because he'll say yes to every interview. He's always like really nice, really personable. So like that's a really easy way to get hyped as well.
I also think there was just as a quick aside, I also think the fact that he came in at the same time as Caps and that they were supposed to be like, wow, we're bringing them both in and developing them. But he, in some mad way, got to like sort of wash along in the like after stream of Caps of like, but Caps became godlike and mega. It's like, mate, can we use our eyes again and look at that this isn't at all the same scenario, is it? Like, this is ridiculously different.
Oh, and the difference is... wait. But the massive difference is that Caps is known for coin flipping every game when he first started, not playing as conservatively as possible. And I will not use that line again, not just because he used it once, because I need to get a job in wire. But like he coin flipped every fucking game. Caps was the 2 sides of the same coin. You know, completely different from Nemesis now. It lands at one side every time, and it's towards his tower with a wave frozen near him, like every time.
Which, by the way, is the in-game play version of the premise we've discussed many times before, which is I'd rather have the guy who talks too much and I just tell him slightly where not to talk than the guy who never talks and I have to convince him to talk. So in the same sense, if you're a guy who doesn't do decisive things and you don't want to, fucking hell, how am I supposed to inception plant that into your mind that that's good? Whereas the guy who does like a million ints, I can work with you. I can just polish a few rough edges on. You're going to be amazing. Yeah,
100%.
Like, people might think they're on the opposite ends, but actually, the guy who's aggressive is way closer to where you want him to be, in my opinion.
Usually, because, like, the guy who's aggressive, right, who always takes those situations where he can coin flip and either he'll be really ahead or really behind, will really know how to play the game if he's ahead, right? Like, that guy always knows how to play the game with a lead. And so, like, the game becomes really easy off of that.
It's also, by the way, just as a quick aside, if you want to use the general meta principle, playing reactively in almost any sport is the hardest possible way to play the game. Because since you don't dictate the way the game goes, you have to instantly read what the guy does and do the correct counter. And sometimes, depending on what the situation is, the counter just neutralizes. It doesn't even get you ahead. So it's very, very tough to play that stuff. It's probably the hardest to execute in any game, I think.
So the idea is that when you combine that with scaling, it theoretically becomes the correct way to play the game. Because if there's always a counter, then but obviously the win margin for error of that is really low. But also what you do is you essentially start to ignore a lot of the more nuanced issues teams have when they are playing progressively, i.e. there are many ways in which when you scout teams that don't opt in for that kind of play style, where they leave themselves exposed, where you can capitalize on it now, where you would be disincentivized from doing that in the kind of manner in which you just said. Like if you're just playing reactively in the way you just said, you're waiting for them to do their aggressive thing, but there are multiple steps leading up to that aggressive thing that you could probably be abusing if you yourself were being provoked at the same time, and would be much more effective against that specific team. But if you ignore all of that to try to kind of play your own game in that very reactive style, you are in fact trying to play suboptimally. And this is how pretty major upsets happen against teams that try to do that sort of thing, right? Like you can't say that stuff like LeBlanc or like there's a famous like Lee Sin thing going around right now are ineffective in this meta if you have watched any team play. You can't say that, because if you're going against any of those teams that you watch play and you don't think Lee Sin is effective in this particular game, you are fucking trolling. You are fucking ludicrously trolling. And if you don't take advantage of the fact that these champions will work against that specific team and you lose anyway, well then I guess you have a really great excuse as to why you lost. But why would you do that when
you
win?
It's like, well, we should have, and then you can explain what should have happened. Yeah, of course.
Example, like I always think of Kiana as like the epitome of that, right? Because there's no lane that Kiana wins. Like she just doesn't win a lane, but there will always be a window or an opening where your jungle comes mid or someone backs at the wrong time and you can go bottom and get a fucking double kill. And that's just like the way Kiana works. And sure, it doesn't work all the time, but that champion works way more than it should theoretically if you're playing every lane optimally against it.
You can know that versus this specific team, it will work if you've done your scouting. You can know that. It's not like we're saying that we will flip it in draft. We know it's not a flip because we know this team's tendencies. It's not a flip if you've put the work in. And that's the characterization that people have like given this sort of thing, but it's just not true. It's just not actually how any of this stuff works. But
it's like, put it this way, to bring it back to my boy LS again, this is one of the areas where I do fundamentally disagree with him. I mean, I don't, because here's the thing, as long as I know he's operating in the theoretical world, I actually think the guy's like fucking got a super aptitude for thinking that way. He's gotten very deep down that rabbit hole, and hence why he's constructed a whole model of the game and terminology, and it's very interesting if you know what he's talking about. The problem is, it does disclude what actually happens in practice, and if you're someone, like you guys have worked in coaching, practice is everything. Like, the theoretical side, as we discussed earlier, is all brilliant and good and etc., but half the time you don't even have the fucking players who can do that. So the ultimate example of where LS does that is where he wants the like fucking people to freeze the lane. Whereas it's like, yes, okay, you're right. If I have this specific matchup and the top laner freezes and everyone plays perfectly of the other four, we're going to shit on them. This would be an amazing game. The problem is, because they're 4 humans, and that's not the way League of Legends has been played, and they haven't been trained that way for most of their lives. It's the same, it's the EU equivalent of why it's not. I've stopped moaning about North American teams not sidelaning. I know why. It's because the second that you're sidelaning, the fucking idiots that are holding the midsection just die and just inexplicably take a fight. And it's like, guys, the one thing you weren't supposed to do was take the fight. And they're like, but it's almost like they forget there's not 5 people there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the other thing is that, like, the whole idea that teams don't do this because they don't understand it is just, like, wrong. Like, he's not the only one that understands all these concepts of the game. He's just the only one that keeps falling back to them because other teams can talk about how other teams behave. You know, and then, if you can talk about how other teams behave, it becomes a different game. And then the obvious argument there is, well, if you only play to the level of your opponent, then the game itself will not develop properly. That's a very commonly given argument to that. Sure. But the actual way that it goes is that if you do keep, say that I am a team that looks to punish like Team X, right? And I punish Team X really extensively. They look at that VOD, they see where they got punished, they fix that, and now it becomes much harder to punish them the next time I play against them, right? So Team Y plays against Team X again, and this time when they go for that stuff, they actually lose, right? Because this team has band-aided all that stuff. So now they're back to the drawing board. They have to figure out how that team is now. And now Team Y comes back and they beat them again and they're different. Eventually, this will happen until it gets to a point where these teams are so good at being proactive that the steps towards being proactive aren't the things you can abuse anymore. And the actual optimal way to beat them will be to play reactively, just because otherwise there aren't really the actual things to abuse is the fact that they are being proactive in the first place, right? And that's when now trying to play a reactive playstyle that, like you say, is technically speaking harder in a lot of instances, because if they get these dives off, etc., it can snowball really heavily outside of your favor. Yeah, that is when you start going to that, because you basically have no other choice. The game is still evolving. The game will still evolve and tend towards that optimal direction in the future. Of course. It's just that while these teams have these clear holes, you'd be a fucking idiot not to be abusing those. You'd be a fucking idiot. And like Febiven openly admits that LeBlanc is really, like I've said this before on this show, like this episode, Febiven openly admits LeBlanc is really bad. People just don't have to counter her, but he's not a fucking idiot, so he actually picks her when he knows that he can abuse it. Like, he's not a fucking... You would be being an idiot.
Which, by the way, is also cool as fuck to say, just publicly, like, yeah, that champion I'm playing and winning on, it's actually supposed to be bad, but if none of you can figure it out, I'm just going to keep picking it. That's actually gangster, by the way, Febiven.
Yeah, and on the flip side, there are people saying, well, it shouldn't be good, so I just won't pick it. But it is good, and you're
Which is the forgiven way of thinking, by the way. That is the forgiven Callista theory right there. Sure. It doesn't matter that it's really good when these guys use it. Like, it shouldn't be, and it will be patched, and people will figure it out. It's like, well, yeah, but until then, can you use it?
That's like the really weird thing, too, is the idea that, well, they're eventually going to patch this, so I'm not going to learn how to play it, right? But if that's the case, then just don't fucking practice it.
I know, it's next level, isn't it? It's a fucking next level. I always used to think, like, where does this end, though, mate? That's the problem. That's not the end. That's the beginning of madness. And you can also use that logic with almost anything in the game, exactly. Like, why learn anything? Just like if you're a jungler, just wait till next year. They change your jungle anyway, mate. So problem solved, right?
You know which team could change jungler? Which team could change jungler is Origin. All right, getting back to like the topic at hand. All right, I have something here. All right, I figured this out. I figured this out. Wait, I figured this out. All right, okay. So the real problem that we have, okay, is that Upset basically won't accept any support in Europe because he just views everybody as not being able to keep up with him, right? That's fucking true, right? Like he has a very difficult time doing this. So the grass is always green on the other side, so they end up having to import for him until you get to this kind of ridiculous situation we're on right now. Okay, all right.
The problem with that is that obviously doesn't make any sense in itself. But keep going.
Now, if we want, I mean, he has a grass is greener mentality, all right. So the support that he doesn't know.
No, that's not what he's got. What he's doing is he thinks that all the girls at the bar are ugly, so he's fucking a blow-up doll. like listen, I agree with the first part. Yeah, maybe they're not the hottest group of people, but the point is the alternative's not better, is it? I'm not hating on either side on that one.
Look, either way, if we want to solve this problem, we have to cast our minds back to 2017 Vitality. Okay, right. I'm taking you all the way back here. Okay,
is this when Kick has joined?
Well, everyone...
Season 8, never mind, I'm thinking the wrong year. Right, okay.
Yeah. So this is when there's like GBM and shit coming in, all right? This is what we're talking about, right? Okay. Now, what we all remember is that Kasing was a pile of poo, all right? Now, what people also remember is that he was replaced by someone that Upset has a history of really respecting, all right? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, but Vander's on Rogue. I guess maybe you're like looking for a swap. Actually, people forget, all right, that for a few weeks, NateDOhDoubleG returned as a support player. All right. And it was the meta where Malzahar support was actually a really strong pick. And he was able to play all of that shit. And he actually wasn't that bad. Now, Upset basically hero worships NateDOhDoubleG. All right. So here's my proposal, okay?
This is your modest proposal, is it? This is ridiculous.
All right, this is what I'm saying. All right, feel free to pay me later.
Come on.
All right, you grab NateDOhDoubleG. All right, you throw him into support. You save money by firing Xerxes. All right, and then you grab my boy Tinks and you grab my boy Leader, and boom, now you're gonna contest with Fnatic every fucking time. I guarantee. All right, you can get Tinks Leader on cheap. All right, these guys are fucking desperate. Okay, and they are fucking insane, and they are way better than the players that you have there right now. You get to maintain Alphari because you're not dumping money into Xerxes anymore. TSM gets a new jungler. Everybody fucking wins. All right. And Upset has a support that he is happy with and who also has the ability to tell Upset what to do. This is
one small problem.
The best way possible. What's the problem?
I say a small problem. It's an enormous problem, but it should only be a small problem. Here's the small problem, Veteran. And you know it from being on these shows. If you try telling anyone who is in Origin that maybe there are flaws with Cersei and NateDOhDoubleG, it's like fucking Westworld when those hosts are like, doesn't seem like anything to me. It's like, you can't get it. You'll never get through to them, mate. Like they're like in a fucking mind prison where you can't get them out of that.
I'm not okay. No, but I'm not saying there are flaws with NateDOhDoubleG. I'm saying,
but Cersei's the one that they're not going to do it. He's the deal breaker.
I'm saying that there are even more positives that NateDOhDoubleG has that you're not considering.
You could sell that, but the problem is you're not going to get them to kick Cersei. You're just not going to.
I'm not certain that NateDOhDoubleG would be a great support, and here's my argument. Okay, so you want a support who's like usually good at playmaking, right? Who's gonna see angles that like are really winnable that no one else sees. I don't think NateDOhDoubleG is that player. So yeah, that's my concern. Maybe he'd be good in like a mage support meta, and maybe that's where we're going. But I feel like he just plays like I see NateDOhDoubleG as what Thorin describes as a Korean, like, oh, we have a 41% chance of winning this fight, so we will not take it, like this kind of thing. And he just plays like, it's like he plays things like really, really kind of optimally from an analyst side of where you can see the game and kind of enjoy it. But I don't see him as like the I'm gonna go in here or I'm gonna frontline here or
would he
like,
be better than Destiny?
Kind of player. Huh?
Would he be better than Destiny in this hypothetical shadow box? That obviously is a ridiculous question, but we have to ask it anyway.
Maybe, but he'd also be learning the rules. So, like, the question is, how long would it take him to be insane? Or
Okay.
would Origin make worlds? Is the question. Like, if he rolls 12 to support.
I have two arguments to this. NateDOhDoubleG had an idea of how to play jungle when he was last on Elitists United in front of his own jungler, and it all seemed to involve ganking mid lane a lot. If he takes this in support, he's basically already a master of the role. Okay, all right, and he'll have to prove that the best thing his support should have always been doing is roaming mid off of every single fucking back and getting those priority backs ASAP. All right. Now the second argument is that I'm not saying, all right, that NateDOhDoubleG is the best or even great when it comes to support.
He just secretly wants to get Leader and Tinks into the team. That's how he's going to do it.
Well, I would not admit that if that was true. What I'm definitely saying is that he's what I am arguing, all right, is that he's the best support you
because he's Upset.
Agree with.
Yes, because he would play with Upset. Exactly. Yes, that's the mechanism, right?
Yes. Right? He's the best. So, because Upset won't take rookies. Like, he just won't for the most part. I'm actually surprised that they got him on board with Destiny. I'm not sure like what kind of weird mind games they did, but it probably won't work again. So
they just got him to say no to everyone else first. That's what they did. That's how.
I also feel like
Upset to say yes to someone.
Here's the thing as well. I also feel like, I mean, it's sad because it's not true, unfortunately. But Upset, I think actually Upset feels like he's finally out of prison of being on the bad teams. It's like, right now I'm on a really good team. Look, I've got like fucking Alphari and NateDOhDoubleG. Like, you know, play it a bit quiet at first, you know, sort of earn my rank, and then I can be a bit more vocal, you know. Whereas it's like, listen, I know on the surface it looks like that because that is the entire facade that Origin has. It's like, we're just like G2 and Fnatic, and we've got the same money and the same potential. You know what? We'll be right there, just finishing almost third or fourth. Almost did it again. Damn it, next year. And so the problem is, I actually do think that like, he just would have said yes to anything in that regard, you know. Like if they were like, "Oh, just do this," yeah, whatever. Well, I'm in on the team now, so I'll just. It's like if we're a piece away next year, I'll wait till next year because he's been on so many bad teams at this point in time, mate. Or rather, teams that wouldn't have won, and you can at least mindfuck yourself into believing with these solos you could win.
The argument is that this is the last year that Origin are going to have resources to have this kind of roster, right?
Basically,
so if that's
as
our
far as I know.
argument, then they should be willing to. Then I feel like that will make them more risk averse in terms of swapping NukeDuck, because they'll feel like NukeDuck, especially if their idea is that NukeDuck is an insane mid laner, right? They'll probably just be like, no, we're not role swapping that. We're keeping that until.
I mean, let's be real. They're never going to be. They're not ever actually role swapping, Kelsey.
Right?
This is a pure hypothetical. Let's be real. They're never actually doing this in any context.
I have a plan to save money. All right, fire Xerxes. Job done.
Nice. Is Xerxes really expensive though? Maybe. Actually, he might be.
I would assume that he definitely was after winning like all
NukeDuck Alfari, but I don't know.
I'm definitely not to the extent that. Yeah. I would assume that as well, but I would also, I mean, especially given that he was given a team liquid offer, that must have bumped his price up.
Probably.
For Origin. Yeah. I wouldn't change anything about G2 except role swapping perks back.
Wait a minute, were you talking about Cersei there got a team liquid offer?
Yeah, I mentioned that at the...
By the way, wait a second. Misfits GM, take a seat for a minute, mate. Team Liquid GM, take a seat next to this motherfucker. So your two people you were going to replace Xmithy with were fucking Broxer and Cersei.
Yep.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, Xerxes was contacted first, as far as I know.
This is mental. This guy, like, whoever this guy is, like, is he the one who's got a secret conflict of interest with TSM? Are you trying to sabotage Team Liquid? It's like you've got all these sick players, and you're trying to pick, like, the junglers that would never work with them.
That was the goal. It worked, you know.
Well, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, again, they put this, according to Doublelift, they put this all to a vote, and Doublelift was the only one that wanted to keep Xmithy. So, like, I don't know what maybe Xmithy, like, slept with all of their, like, actually, what I think it probably was, because I've been on teams where this has pissed people off before, is that Xmithy was probably the guy that wasn't playing League, right? Like, where he definitely was addicted to, like, Fortnite at some point, right? So he probably everyone just did, so it was really easy to blame him when things went south, right? It was very easy to be, this guy's not putting the work in, even if this guy is really effective on the ground for him. When you have to, like, live with this guy day to day and you're grinding solo queue and you turn around and he's playing Fortnite, it would piss you off. So it's
basically what pisses every Korean who goes to LCS off.
The other thing is, like, players claim they don't read Reddit or they don't agree with Reddit opinions, but obviously everyone last year was fucking calling for Smithy's head, right? So that can have a psychological effect too, where it's like the player on your team that's getting flamed the most, obviously he's the problem.
By the way, players who say they don't read Reddit are just like analysts who say they mute the cast. You're lying. Not least because you keep getting maybe you don't, but everyone else definitely watches because they get triggered on Twitter all the time, you know. You can't get triggered if you had the stream muted. I'm just saying.
She's lying if she ever says that, but I'm not
50-50. So.
50-50. Yeah, okay.
By the way,
I live view, so you can see for a fact that I do not have the card.
Just as an aside, Veteran, I'll just throw this to you. You might have seen me tweet about it, but I won't say what the content is. I mean, people might think like, why am I choosing not to call people out? But whatever. This is just an example of where it's mainly like it's the trend that I don't like, not the specific example. So I'm not going to highlight the specific person. But I was listening to some content around League of Legends with some of the LCS casters or people of that ilk, right? And in it, when they were talking about Kobe, they said that the reason he hadn't lived up to expectations is that he wasn't this like star AD carry that he was in Europe. He wasn't this lane dominant. Like, dude, when he said that, I'd say I got tasered. Like, I thought for a second, like I'm actually like stuck in a coma or something. Like, this can't be real.
Yeah,
like, this is a sign that the dreams come alive. Like, what worlds, like, these guys get paid to scout these motherfuckers. If he's coming to TSM, like, here's the other thing, right? If he was going and joining the worst team and he was going to be in the lane, okay, maybe then you say, well, I'll learn with everyone else what he's like. If he's joining a team that you think might win the league, you at least watch a few VODs, right? You don't. Yep. That's almost like a Reddit opinion, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Reddit opinion.
It basically is, yeah. I don't know why I said that. It is.
That's the thing. That's where you were wrong in your sentence, Thorin. You said you're paid to scout these players. They're not. They are paid to put on a show for Reddit. And that's the best way to get buy-in from Reddit is to mirror Reddit's opinions so Reddit thinks that it's really fucking smart, all right? So they are incentivized not to fucking scout Thorin. There is no market for scouts. That's the black pill. Take it. All the work is for fucking nothing. It's detrimental to your actual success. The end.
So I agree and disagree, because I think sometimes if you have like a really weird opinion, then that will get upvoted. But the other thing is that, but I also think that, like, a lot of it, like there were a lot of weird conversations where the bad laning was blamed on Norskarin.
Which is so mental, isn't it?
It was really strange because it's like a lot of, especially after his Worlds performance, people are just saying that he inted all the time.
They act like he did that the whole year, basically. Like his Worlds performance was what he did all year, basically. That's what everyone claims now.
He carried the game that they won against SKT.
And a lot of the inting and setup, so like going back to Xerxes, which started it, a lot of the weird setup with a lot of the setup for ganks and stuff had to come off of Norskarin basically feeding, because he would have to go in first before like Xerxes committed to anything, was basically what I observed from their Worlds runs. So I think that, and a lot of that also came off of like the weird controversy with Norskarin and the word that he shouldn't have said.
Of course. It doesn't help, of course, yeah.
That completely just like destroyed his reputation in so many ways. Suddenly he also just became a bad player off of that too, I think. So I don't know. It was weird. But there's that, and it's like also if you go back and you watch the previous year's plays, then his laning was still not good with Kasing. And obviously it's Kasing, so you can also argue that Kasing is bad. But at a point, you have to start asking, does Kobe know how to lane? Like someone has to fucking have seen a lane that he did well in to come to the conclusion that his laning was really good.
Because that was what confused me. I mean, unfortunately, I can already tell, like, I'm just going to be a broken record coming back to the GMs over and over again. Like, but didn't they know what type of player they were signing? Obviously, the answer every time is like, no, you fucking idiot. They don't scout. But you know, one of my problems, Veteran, you've probably noticed this is why I get so triggered on Twitter. My ultimate problem in life is I always keep returning back to the totally delusional perspective that life should be like reasonable and fair and people should actually like understand what's going on, which is obviously, I'm the deluded one. That's the most ridiculous premise. But somehow I always return to that starting point and then just get disappointed by humans failing me again.
But this is the equivalent, right? This is the equivalent of thinking that teams should be aspiring to play perfect league. No, they should just be aspiring to beat the next
You're right, it is.
Yeah, teams shouldn't be aspiring to have the best scouts or anything. They should be aspiring to make a return on money for the love of God.
It's like if you notice, I have also, just to make myself not just go mad criticizing people a million times the same way, that's why I've pivoted to, because I know the business side, just judging them based on the expectations. Like, you know, if you are the FlyQuest team, like, they actually spent some money, but you did actually pretty well in the context. It doesn't matter you didn't win. You weren't ever going to win. So, you know, that it allows me to at least stay sane, but also make meaningful points. But anyway, the point I was going to make about the TSM pickup is, there's another one I just don't get, dude. Because here's the thing that's crazy. I actually initially thought TSM picked him up because they knew what they were doing. I thought, right, what they've done is, Broken Blade was looking very promising as a carry, and you've got Bjergsen, so perfect, let's just get this fucking, basically we're going to make like a hold bot lane, it's like fucking a shit version of Praying Gorilla, and then we're just going to have the solo lanes go off. Instead, like they always do in TSM, half the games, like Bjergsen would be like the supportive guy, like, what is this draft, like, holy shit, like, and so sadly, they didn't see it the way I did, like, so I actually think it could have worked, but I think they just had totally the wrong vision for it, you know?
I mean, I don't think it's bad because I think TSM in 2019 looked better when they played to top. So, of course. Yeah, I thought it was fine.
I mean, here's something else, by the way, actually, that we haven't brought up here. I think it is a debate right now on other shows you've had, Thorin, so you might have stuff to say on this. But another aspect we have been talking about is that you've obviously signaled out the GMs here, and the GMs being the ones constructing the roster. Maybe the GMs did do their due diligence and scout properly. But the difference is that the GMs aren't the ones actually running the scrims, and they're not the ones running the team. The coaches are. Just because the GMs have watched the VODs doesn't necessarily mean that the coaches watch the VODs of Kobe before Kobe comes in, or that they have the same read on Kobe that the GMs did. This separation of GM and coach when it comes to actually building the roster strikes me as deeply inefficient, because just because you have a vision of what the team should be doesn't mean the coach will instantly share your vision. No matter how many times you explain it to him, you might as well be speaking two different languages at that point. So
that's just my other trigger bit, because I have to say, one area that I've always hated LCS for is LCS is global meta thinking. If this champion is busted, we play it. If this comp is good, it's like, but dude, the person who's playing the champ he's not going to be as good as that. Like, that doesn't make sense, but you can never get through their heads. Like, and I won't say, I'm not saying this to hate on him, he's just an example of it, but that is one area where that is a conclusion I came to from talking to Loco. Like, he was a perfect example of that. Like, if he really thought that this just made sense, like, but the Koreans are saying it's the good. It's like, yeah, they're Koreans though, mate. You're not, you know.
Yeah, I've had discussions with Loco where it's like, if you're the only one picking it, is it actually good? Like these types of conversations. So
yeah, I mean, but here's the big thing, right? Like where Kelsey is completely correct is that when China actually just tries to, like, a Chinese team will be like, this is how we play the best, so we'll just try to get the best in the world at this particular way of playing. Like, she's correct that is like probably the best way to do it. What America does though is that America then looks at like the average of how the Chinese teams play, and they're like, all right, we'll try to play like this, and then they will therefore, when they meet these guys internationally, wonder why they lost, when all they are is literally a knockoff of these guys who wait to see what these guys do before they do anything. Like, if you, and this is something that held the West back for ages, when the West had an idea of what Korea was doing and they tried to imitate Korea. It's like, how the fuck do you think you're ever going to actually beat Korea by trying
I've got a little anecdote for you.
It's also this kind of weird way of thinking too in NA, where it's like, well, obviously we're not that good, so we should learn, right? We should copy first. So I think it's I kind of see that and I kind of don't, but it's almost like this forced humility that I think is also a problem, right?
Basically, they're
actually need to be better.
Yeah, they just don't believe that they have anything to bring to the table. They think it all has to come from Korea and China and all this bullshit. Because the thing is, I've got a quick anecdote along these lines, right? Which I don't know if this, sadly, this was just burned on Twitter by Monty and it got lost in the mix. A lot of people don't know. It's a brilliant story, but he told it too many years later, which is, like, if you notice, one of my tricks that I do on Twitter is when I reference and call back to something, I do often do it like as a way to sort of needle your mates and sort of like trigger them a bit and just see how they'll react. And what happened was I once triggered him about the fact that, if you remember, where actually the beef with TSM comes from, if people don't know, isn't that I lied about TSM or said that. It's not that stuff. What happened was we were really critical of them at a time in, like, I think it was like summer of season 4, when obviously Monty coached CLG, their main rival. And at the time they were both like battling to see who was going to be the best team along with Cloud9. And so what happened was, famously, he took them on that boot camp to Korea, right? Which unfortunately played into all these narratives. That's like, oh, he's going to coach them up and boot camp them. And this is the part people don't know. Everyone knows they came back and they just bombed the playoffs completely. They looked fucking terrible. And then Monty obviously, like, essentially got not fired because it was the end of his contract. He just got let go, essentially. And then Reginald famously said, you know, he wasn't a real coach. And then it was just a clusterfuck of drama. What people don't know, and this is sick that actually Monty just kept this in. I can't believe he just let this eat away at him and didn't say it publicly. Because he obviously, I think, because he was friends with Hotshot and stuff, thought, like, you know, I'll just take the bullet on this one and I'll kind of like let the players slide. It turns out, right, this is insane, dude. When he had them in Korea for the boot camp, he was working on shit with them the whole time. He had them working on things that worked. And then what happened was, they went to the finals of the fucking LCK back when it was OGN Champions, when Samsung Blue were playing against fucking KT Arrows, right? And Samsung Blue was the best team in Korea at the time. And basically they came home and abandoned everything Monty had worked on with them and just tried playing comps that Samsung Blue played, and then basically fucked the whole game. And like, this is the perfect example, because they thought, British the best thing. It's like, you can't execute that, mate. You're not Samsung Blue. Yeah, they didn't get it. They really didn't get it.
The big thing is Samsung Blue at the time as well was just playing pure scaling and literally like waiting to win. Yeah, so what happened was that when they came to NA, they just rolled out the red carpet to the Nexus and just fucking rolled over and died really fast. I actually remember that. They were like playing Cogmore and shit when no one else was in NA. It was so fucking funny watching them doing that. Actually, yeah, I remember that at the time. But I don't know. Like, honestly, yeah. NA, I don't know what NA's excuse is now, though. Like, NA doesn't really have that. Actually, what's happened is that you've actually reached the end goal of trying to be a worse version of other regions. You have now just imported everybody from all of the other regions that you possibly can until you're literally just a scrap heap of every single other region possible. And then you wonder why nothing is working. Like, you cannot be anything if you're the NALCS right now, but a worse version of some weird amalgamation of the European and Korean.
Just to clarify, because I realize this might actually sound weird, go and check other VODs. Veteran does talk that way. He just talks with like the royal you, like you can't do it. Like, he's not literally blaming Kelsey here. Like, because it might sound like he's saying to Kelsey that you in NA, you know what, Kelsey, you can't keep doing this. You've become a person. He's not doing that. He's actually just using it like as a general third person.
Yeah.
One of 3 NA academies, and I've just imported all of them.
Why are you doing that, Kelsey? Will you just fucking stop already and just learn your own style?
But I mean that is the inherent issue in America anyway. Like it's always just tried to be a worse version of everything else, you know? Which is probably like, I mean, effectively what NA did as a league is like the league definition of cuckoldry, right? Like they loved what Korea did so fucking much. They basically they synchronized their style with them as much as they could, and then Europe just came along and fucked them completely. So
I will say something though that is like I think kind of overlooked is because people just say like, and that is what we mean when we say NA solo queue sucks. So if you want to, like, say you're a European mid laner and you want to practice matchups on LeBlanc, you go into the EU server and you're facing a lot of EU mids who actually understand matchups and laning and wave control and have played like opposite sides of LeBlanc matchups. A lot of them play professionally. Like it's very rare that a challenger EU player isn't on an ERL team at least, right?
Yeah, there's so many teams.
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, if you're a grandmaster, you get a job offer straight up in your.
And it also works the other way. That's why you get recruited. Exactly. Yeah.
And in solo queue, you're going to go in, and the other guy is going to be playing something that is most likely like
Annie mid
or a one trick, or
there we go.
Someone who's playing like
Yasuo into everything.
Not remotely meta, right? Into like, so like if you want to practice LeBlanc matchups. I guess the easier one would be bot lane, just because there are so many like mage support, high elo. So like you're gonna play against a fucking Sona. Like this is not useful practice. I'm not actually learning. So the best way to actually learn lane matchups and to learn champions and to learn things in like the game in general is to watch like pro view and VODs of like Koreans and Europeans playing the actual fucking matchups. Because you can't actually learn to play the matchups in NA solo queue. It's really ridiculous. Like that's one thing that I'll point out is that it's like really difficult to kind of understand like how to level up without watching other regions, just from the state of why, like that's what we mean when we say NA solo queue is so bad, right? So
I actually have a question for you. Is NA solo queue seasonal? Because theoretically, when LCS is in season and all the European and Koreans are there, then you theoretically have an influx of people who actually know how to play matchups. But then once they're all removed, everybody who is normally in NA solo queue just loses all of that, and suddenly there's a massive skill drop. But I don't know if that actually does happen.
In fairness, I pay less attention to solo queue in off season, which. Sure. But like, yeah, I'm watching way more solo queue in season, so it's kind of hard for me to say. I know that like you're probably thinking, but with scouting work, you should be watching more. But it's just like it's always there, right? Like I'm always watching my players and everyone else, and a lot of the scouting work is watching like VODs of amateur and stuff like that. So
okay,
and then watching solo queue from when it was, but that like so I'm not really sure if we could call it season. There's obviously like a huge drop from when pros are playing and when they're not, right? Like that's very obvious, like a big drop in those times. Like when is the optimal time to play solo queue?
I'm just wondering how that would affect it, because imagine that you are just like a native North American player, and you know that there's like kind of an optimal time in the season.
Will. Because like most of your best players are going back home, right?
Yes.
And the rest of the NA players are like out of season, probably taking it easy for a while too. Like the NA pros are probably not ridiculously spamming solo queue at least for a couple of weeks. And then once they get over their break, they'll start spamming again. But yeah, there's no reason to believe that there isn't a drop off. So
sure.
Let's pivot to another team then. So Misfits is an obvious one to talk about. As you alluded to, Veteran, the problem with Misfits basically is it's the whole reason, by the way, why I always think also, just as a quick aside, that GMs are terrible in North America, because you don't even need 5 good players there. You just need a really good mid and jungle. You fucking dominate the whole league. So I don't know why people don't just put all the money in the mid jungle, but never mind, put that to one side. So in Europe, they showed basically the European version of that. They had like, when Razork was on, he looked really good. He had a couple of off games, and then obviously Featherman was really good. Aside from that, I mean, Denick was good, but the rest of the piece just sometimes worked. Like this looked like the ultimate team where it was obvious they were going to drop off. And presumably in the summer, they're not going to be the best team, right?
All right, I have 5 things to add. All right,
Come on.
Kobbe. All right, Kobe to Misfits, immediate, perfect. All right, fucking his girlfriend already works for the goddamn org. Like, it's absolutely perfect. He has inspiration from how he just got replaced. How is this not actually like the plan is being laid out in front of him?
There you go. I like
the plan is being laid out in front of him. You know, like I swear to God, though, if he comes.
By the way, it's even better than that veteran. He's got the ultimate way to do the poaching. Here's what you do. He just says to his girlfriend, I think it's really cool, actually, the way that Doublelift went to the same team as Lena and he plays with her now. And he doesn't have to say anything else. I've just given you a perfect example of how poaching is unenforceable.
Exactly. There you go.
Genius.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then she just goes,
anyway,
she just does a very slow wink to the camera like, yes, I also think that was good. Now let's never speak of any of this again. And then in an interview with Riot, they just say that. Then the problem solved. And Riot goes, doesn't seem like anything to me. And then it's over.
But unironically, there's like a really fucking good AD carry out there that they haven't, blown all relations with, like Neon, who definitely wants a team right now, maybe wants to come back to Europe, and they do need to make upgrades down there. Like when we had Youngbuck, the whole time we were talking about Misfits, all you're saying is he can just like gank bot lane repeatedly and the game is over, right? Put Kobbe on there, you have an upgrade. Febiven, mid jungle, ridiculously strong. They're actually controlling the map right now, which means that the fact that Kobbe doesn't actually, despite what apparently the dive thinks, it's not actually like a lane dominant AD carry, doesn't really matter so much if you have this degree of priority on midsection, and Denick is still able to play map states out really well. So I think that's the immediate upgrade that they can and should be looking as a priority to make. And let's be real, after these guys paid 100k buyout for a player that they never even used, quite clearly they have the money to spend. All right, clearly they don't have an issue with throwing money around. Well, just throw it at Kobbe and a ton of your problems are solved.
Would that actually have like a significant effect though? Like, do you think it would put them up to the brink of competing with the top tier?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when it came to playoffs, when it came to late game situations, B-Boy was getting caught out in these fights a lot in ways that 100% Kobbe will not be doing. The immediate band-aid to that would be having a player like Kobbe that infamously in Europe came online at 3 items, and he was incredibly consistent when he came online at 3 items. So it's just everything before that made me think he wasn't worthy of his first all pro team that he ended up getting, right? But yeah, he immediately band-aids a lot of their issues that they had that actually lost them that playoff series versus Rogue. Those games lasted so long that if Kobbe was there, you have 2 threats from Febiven and Kobbe instead of just 1 from Febiven, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that as much as we've kind of like flamed Kobbe's laning, he's very good at maximizing the gold he uses in terms of damage in fights. So if that's something that they want for like being able to team fight better, which I think they kind of suck at right now, it's not the worst idea.
I think it's a great move. I always say Kobbe is just reckless light. Which isn't a diss, by the way, in this case.
Yeah,
like,
no,
if you want Reckless, Kobbe is the next best option. Get him. He's going to do exactly what you're saying now.
The child's idea of Reckless is literally Kobbe. You know, like it's literally Kobbe. Like, so yeah, I actually agree with you there. I think it's a good way of thinking about it.
Reckless is like a key defining characteristic is his wave manipulation, though, and Kobbe sucks at that. But other than that, yeah, I'm on board.
Do you think children think about wave manipulation, Kelsey? All right, like the analogy works even better for what you just said.
Depends on whether or not they're Viper's 13-year-old brother.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. When you say like a 13-year-old kid has like made it to Challenger in North America, I don't take that as wow, what an amazingly talented 13-year-old kid.
It scores the other way on that one, doesn't it? Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, it's even worse than I thought over there.
No, exactly. It's like you have no idea how bad it is. That's the meme, right?
There you go. It's true. You don't necessarily have to know wave manipulation to make it to Challenger in NA, so that's fair. All right.
I mean, is there anything else? Well,
yeah, wait there a second. What were we talking about on that part? I think I had like another point to make about the Kobbe angle, but I can't remember what it was. I know what it was. I just wanted to say, just for the 1 millionth time since you referenced it, let's just get it on the record again for anyone who wasn't listening last year. That first team all-pro selection of Kobe does tilt the shit out of me. Because first of all, it's a classic example of exactly the thinking we were using before, of like, well, if you're on a top team, you must be one of the top players, and if you have the best stats, you must be the top player, and if you won the MVP of the week, you must be the best player. Like it's all this, because this is the reason why it tilts me. I know a lot of people, it's actually my entire career in a nutshell. If you don't know, right, when I actually first started, for probably the first 10 years of my career, I was doing work like I do now. Like I was billing it like if you're the best player, you're some like godlike titan in the game who like enforces his will upon the, like I was making it cinematic and cool because that is what it is to me. But everyone else was just looking at me like, you're a bit fucking weird, mate. This is just a Counter-Strike tournament. Like I'm just good. Like I don't think about, like even the pro players would basically say that. So the real reason why it tilts me, right, is finally the world's come round to my thinking. They all do think this is a sport, and we all are acting like these are real awards and stuff. So yeah, that's the problem. It's not just a funsies award that's like, who cares who wins it? In history, some kid will look back in 5 years and go, holy shit, Cobbett was the best AD carry that split.
Yes.
What the fuck? Did he just like change the way he played or something? And even worse, they'll be like, he must have been like the main carry of fucking Splice. It's like, well, yeah, but only like 32 minutes, you know, like
I'm gonna really depress you by reminding you that Xerxes and Caps made the third all-pro team this split, and Kazi didn't make any of them, and Shadow and Razork didn't make any of them either. Fucking Xerxes.
Do not pay attention to the LPL All-Pro Team awards.
That's the one that's just purely political, right?
Those ones are so much bullshit. Like the fact that LWX and Puff have gotten first All-Pro is insane to me. So
that would actually be the analogy, by the way. That would be like if the LPL last year even had voted LWX the best ADC. And it's like, well, he's on the best team, but that doesn't make any sense at all.
They actually did.
Yeah, that's the perfect analogy. And by the way, you know why I realised, you've actually also just triggered me again, because you've also made me realise that what I said is true, that people will believe that. Because anyone who went on Reddit after FPX won, because LWX had the kills, because he's the fucking champion that does damage, he literally was being credited by some people. I was like, he carried this game. It's like he was the last person who carried the game. Every other person carried the game except him, in the context of like maximal impact relative to their role. Now, yes, obviously he did his job as the AD carry, but like the difference is, you know, I could take him out and drop him in another team, he'd do nothing.
Yeah, true. That's actually the best way to think about AD carry, because a lot of AD carry is consistency, right? So I guess,
of course.
Yeah, I guess the easiest immediate way to think about it is like, is this a job someone else could do, and would he demonstrably make another team better? Or
speaking of which, though, that is one thing we have to address, is the G2 angle. Now, listen, I know G2, because they've now won, as their divine right, they've decided we have to stop talking about the Caps role swap thing. Like Perks and Grabs have decided, like, please stop doing it. You were wrong. We were right all along. But the problem is, were you right? As far as I can tell, two things happened. One, you found this crazy matchup out of nowhere that no one was prepared for. So that doesn't carry through. And then secondly, he sort of like vaguely learned the really meta champions towards the end. There's still plenty of holes as far as I can tell in Caps' ADC game. So what happens with G2 if they keep this lineup in the same roles?
The big thing as well, which Perks did not want to talk about on our episode, oddly enough, was the fact that they moved into a 1-1-3 setup where Caps would no longer have to be the guy holding mid, so he was no longer the guy that was running it down in mid. You know what? If you're scouting G2 and you've realized, wait a minute, if we just first pick all banners there, they actually start looking really vulnerable, like they actually did in Game 3. They could have very easily lost Game 3. Then, they band-aided. They band-aided that their issue, all right? And that band-aid will not hold. Yes, you do swap Perks and Caps back. I honestly think you do.
Actually, kind of mind-blowing to me that Caps has gone from being like the guy who couldn't sideline to the guy who's like incapable of holding mid.
True. Well, okay, he was incapable of side laning because he overextends. He was capable of playing mid just because it was a shorter lane. So it was a shorter lane, and he could play champions that had disengaged, like Syndra, like Azir, etc., and then hold mid there, right? But Aphelios doesn't do that. If you send on Aphelios, you are dead. Don't care. This is a season 10 champion. You are dead.
Actually, that draft in was semifinals, right? G2, like where he was Aphelios, Thresh, Pantheon, Nico, Zillion. It was just like, this should have been a really, really safe Aphelios game. And they almost lost. There was like one game where I think Perks like misclicked his Zillion ulti. Caps died. But he has to be the guy who's like, if your support uses eat on someone else, you die. As an AD carry. Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, even in his like initial Cogmore game, he wasn't like hyper impressive. He basically just kind of stood there, held W, and killed everyone. With Lulu doing all the hard work. Like,
nope, sorry, Veteran. Whoever gets the kill, they did all the work. We all know that.
Iconic champions are like champions that he jumps at you and kills you, right? Like those ones, AD carries are not going to like jump at you and kill you. They're going to jump at you and auto attack a couple of times and get blown up. So, yeah, I mean,
you're basically describing leader as well right now, by the way. I just want to say.
I mean, yeah, would you swap leader to AD carry? I don't think so.
No,
maybe.
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. You'd swap perks to AD carry, You'd swap perks to AD carry, grab leader, job done, perfect.
I mean, who knew you shouldn't play an AD carry as a fucking burst mid laner? Right, who knew that wouldn't work, eh?
But yeah, I mean, I think most people aren't, like, at least most analytical people aren't convinced that G2 can pull off what they pulled off against Fnatic permanently, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, Veteran. This is Kelsey, you can confirm this. Anytime privately you ever told me an opinion, I know now it's going to seem like a fucking cursed thing to say, but classically in season 5, where obviously you actually did think that like the Chinese teams could win worlds and be super amazing, LGD particularly was super sick, you know. I always tell people when they tell me that privately, like, if you can, make a piece about this now. Because the key thing is, if this does happen, like, it's important to have it on the record that this wasn't out of nowhere. Like, it was a thing that, like, you could have seen the beginning parts of, and you lay your case out, etc. That's why, Veteran, what I'm saying here is, if people who are analytical and people who are on broadcasts and talk shows really believe that, when they've just won and swept the final is the time to say it. Not when he then inevitably does break down. Anyone will be able to see it then. You say it now, because that's almost like the scientific method, isn't it? You can make predictions using it.
But this is the other thing, though, is that you have to think about the comments that were being made about perks at this time last year. Like, people were impressed that he was like so adept at these champions and was able to fill the roles so quickly, and he looked like really good.
Oh, he's riding off the same narrative for sure, yeah.
But Caps is like, this time around, it's like, oh, they made it work. Like,
exactly.
it's not the same level of praise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
that's true. That is true.
It's actually something
it's like, it's really obvious at that point that this is a worse iteration of the roster.
But yeah, no, but that's the crazy thing though. What you've just said there though is what G2 doesn't agree with. That's another thing. All the G2 players, Perks, Yankos, and I think Grabs even alluded to this when he came on our show, all three of them on talk shows that I do have constantly kept bringing up that, like, I'll give you the spoiler, they're too stuck in how summer was, and then the fact that what we don't know but have now heard from anecdotes is that at Worlds they were losing all these scrims, and they really thought they were going to bomb it and not do well enough. So to them, they feel like everything after MSI was busy, like we never got a proper crack at it. Like we just got through summer, and then we somehow did some miracles at Worlds, but, you know, actually it shouldn't have happened. So basically, they get really mad if you imply that the season 9 lineup was like a better lineup than this one. Like they say, like, you know, like that. Essentially, for that reason, they think that, like, well, actually, this has potential to be better or whatever. It's like, what?
So one thing that I think came out was like clear at Worlds is that, like, if you limited Perks' champion pool enough or removed Kai'Sa's Xayah, like these types of things, then he looked worse. I think the response to that should not be, let's put Caps in and see if Caps can learn more AD carries. It should be Perks learns more AD carries. So, yeah, I don't know.
Especially because Caps wasn't a problem at all. Let's be real.
Yeah. I mean, he had a couple of in-games, but yeah, it was just really strange that this was like their response. I think, like, something that I've heard is people posit is that they're just like kind of bored. So if that's the case, then obviously they should swap back for summer. So.
And also, by the way, I used to have the counter to that, didn't I, Veteran? I used to tell them even to their faces, like, well, don't say you're bored because there's this Fnatic team now here and you have to deal with them. It's like, you know what? You win. I was wrong on that one. You win on that one, guys. I guess you can just fuck around and win anyway. Like, why not have Wonder play AD carry next? And you look like a better AD carry than fucking Reckless anyway. Oh, did I say that out loud? Shit. Oh, shit. That's supposed to be a private opinion. No, I know.
I
only in the final, obviously, and because he could play Kalista. Don't really mean it.
We're all talking about perks, caps, and all that role swapping. I just finally want to see my boy Mickey X show that there are supports out there that can role swap. All right, I'll just throw him mid, throw cap support, throw perks back in AD carry. Let's see how the fuck that goes next split. Let's see if they still beat Fnatic then. All right.
I mean, they definitely won't be bored after that. I guarantee them that.
I'm utterly convinced Mickey X can role swap. I'm utterly convinced Mickey X is the only support in Europe that can actually role swap, maybe even the world that can role swap and make it work. All right. I'm convinced he can do that. Like you guys aren't thinking outside the box enough, G2. All right, you just swapping the same two people over and over again. Add the third guy in. Let's see how the fuck that goes. Two mid laners in the bot lane. How the fuck is bot lane not monster one every single game? Like, come on.
So I'm actually kind of curious if this G2 went MSI, because we'll have Jingdong. We'd have like Jingdong, SKT, or I guess T1 is what they're called.
Yes, T1.
We'd have JDG,
Cloud9.
T1, Cloud9, and G2, right? Do you think that they would win it? Like, theoretically. If they would. No.
Let me think.
Because JDG are really similar to the semis roster, the roster that made semis in LPL last year, spring. And then obviously T1 has had some changes, but arguably really similar.
Where's the tournament being held?
and then you have Cloud9, which is obviously very different team to TL, but
if it's being held in China, China wins due to ping advantage. If it's being held in Korea, China wins due to ping advantage. If it's being held in Europe, Europe wins due to ping advantage. And if it's being held in North America, China wins.
The problem is, like,
so you're saying that China wins if both Europe and China
wait. Actually, if it's held in North America, Europe wins because European players have played on the North American server far more than the Chinese have played on the North American.
I mean, she obviously means if it was LAN, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, here's the problem with this scenario, right? Basically, I'll give you my quick version.
Mm-hmm.
The quick version is this. I think if you just looked at the rosters, actually Jingdong should win. If you look at the roster and their relative performance, I think like they have, like if you look at where they would match up with people, they would have a lot of strengths in that tournament. Like they could be fucking monsters. The problem is they also have so many inexperienced players internationally that I would not want to bet. Like if I had to put my life on it, I wouldn't be picking Jingdong for that because like they could just collapse completely.
I mean, the thing about Jingdong is that like, so, and if you're looking at the AD carry weaknesses, then Loken will just kind of like do his job.
Yes.
And then, but the support is, they can take advantage of Fnatic in the same way G2 did, and they will counterpick support a lot. If they're not running with you, Yan John banning 4 supports and picking Alistair blind, that is. But yeah, you know what I mean. I think
and they obviously have the best top and maybe even best jungle as well.
I mean, that was TES, not, I'm trolling. But anyway, they have obviously they have Lumao, who is going to play the Bard. He's going to play the Fiddlesticks. Like he's the guy who plays like the mage supports from JDG. So there's like they could easily take advantage of G2. I would say that T1's roster isn't like T1 look decent.
They're going to have massive stylistic problems. That's the problem I have with T1. Like, I like the players, but I think they could literally go in that tournament and bomb it.
I think the T1 actually feel kind of worse than they were at MSI. So yeah, it's hard. I think that they might be able to still beat T1, and then it's difficult. But I think like I felt confident that G2 were just like the best team, even though I thought IG would win, which is a whole other problem last year. But I think that I would feel less confident in that prediction this time.
I mean, the thing is, surely Wonder is the only top laner that would actually be able to go head to head with Zoom. I know everyone's going to be like, but Licorice, like, all right, mate, well, just let me see it first.
All right.
And the JDG is so weird too, though, because it's like Zoom will just play. Yeah, I mean Zoom is like really in meta right now too. Like that's the thing.
Okay, but what patch would MSI be on? Because I feel like MSI would probably be on patch 10.9, right?
If it started in like 2 weeks, is what you mean?
Yeah, so it would be on 10-9, right? I actually think that favors Wonder a lot more. Especially with changes to what the fuck is that item called? It's the red lethality item with the arrow. Sanguine Blade. The Sanguine Blade changes heavily favoring range split pushers top. I also think every single itemization buff has benefited Kled, for example. Champions like this, I think Wonder Monster excels on. So how does Zoom do in those kinds of champions?
I mean, he can play them, but he's just like way better at playing like tanks for lane and.
Okay, Wonder wins. Wonder wins.
I mean, his GP is still going to be insane. Yeah, I don't think 10 point. We'll see. I haven't looked at the patch as much as I should have yet. So.
Sure.
Should we do one more?
Yeah. For sure.
Want to do one more for the road? Yeah. It's been a pretty long episode, so we won't do every team. So I'll give you the choice. We'll give Kelsey it. This is going to be like you can pick between basically Rogue, Mad Lions, and Schalke. I threw Schalke in there just in case for some bizarre reason you have some predilection towards that. But which of the three would you pick to talk about?
I feel like Mad Lions is probably the least interesting of those because the player that's replaceable is also the one from the pool that we think sucks. So
yes, exactly. And it just seems unlikely they will do it.
Yeah. Rogue, Mad Lions, and Schalke. Actually, maybe Schalke is the most interesting because I feel like there are so many possibilities. So
I will say as well, I actually think if you want to just literally get into like the minutiae, it probably is more interesting in as much as like Rogue is very much a known quantity all across the board. And we've also discussed exactly in what way every fucking episode because unfortunately not much changes. So like start me out then on Schalke because obviously the problem here, I feel like the Schalke's narrative has been so garbage all split long because it goes like this, right? Because the analysts got told by someone there they win all the scrims, they stupidly predicted them to be way better than they should have. That was already wrong. They set the expectations way too high. I even said that, and listen, everyone thinks I just think Shea Forgiven's the best no matter what. I told everyone it wasn't going to be the case. But then, when they had all the failure, people literally instantly pivoted to every person in this roster is trash and it's the worst team. And it's this isn't the worst roster at all. What are you talking about? Like, this roster actually should be better than it is. And some of these players are better than they are. Like, obviously, by the end, NateDOhDoubleG actually look pretty good most of the time. So the problem I have is this, is if, again, we might have to go into the hypothetical, but this should be fixable to make them like at least like a mid-table team.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable that, like, there are maybe 3 positions that you could swap around, and if you go to any one of those, there's like a possibility you get the magic change that fixes the team. So I think
put it this way, if I put Veteran's boy leader instead of Abadaga, doesn't that already start fixing things?
Like, I think mid is the biggest one. It's not because I feel like Abadaga is trash, but because I feel like you want someone who just generates you want someone who generates pressure. And I feel like there are enough mids and ERLs who fit that build that you can throw someone in and it's just there. Because I feel like the laners that they have right now are not laners who necessarily want pressure or who want to go in and make the big play. Like, they're kind of a team that just feels paralyzed by fear at times, you know? So you want someone who's just going to be really ballsy. And there are a lot of mids that I think you can go with, like Leader as an example. Even Special's not too bad because he seems like someone who will just like tell his jungler what to do. Let's see. Let's look at the lanes. I think Magic Felix is not the right one.
The reason I'm being silent for him is because I kind of wish he'd pick Rogue. Because Rogue, for me, is more interesting to talk about because it's a harder problem to solve because there are more people there who are just straight up good. Whereas I kind of feel like I fire 4 people if you put me in charge of Schalke.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's like interesting is it has a lot of positions. So like if you could pick one to replace, which one would it be?
Yeah, exactly. It's more like you should constrain it. Like here's the thing, Veteran, you can only at most replace 2 players.
If I pick
you can only do 2.
2 players. Okay.
Because it's not unreasonable that could happen, you know.
2 players. Fuck. Still back in Tinks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd end up keeping AbbADaGe. I mean, you have to replace jungle support there, or it gets really doomed. Problem is that
I feel like there's
you will not become a top 4 team unless you replace all 4. You won't. Neon is better than Inax. Neon is on their CAD team right now, and he's better than Inax. Like Inax.
Oh, there's the other angle. It's worth mentioning again, just in case anyone's unclear. Mm-hmm. Just because Inax played better for Schalke and Forgiven was fucking moulding, doesn't mean Inax is actually a really good player. Don't be silly. Why is everyone doing that sort of thing?
The thing is that if I replace those two with like insane carries, and then I still have very lackluster jungle support, I end up with the Origin problem, right? I end up with the Origin problem with less experienced players.
Sure.
So it'd be even fucking worse, right? I'm actually effectively a very, very scuffed version of Origin in the fact that Odawamne is my only S-tier player. And yeah, like, so I have to go with jungle support first. If I go with jungle support first, it's much easier to band-aid all the other issues.
I just feel like you're not going to have like a carry who will win the game for you if you don't replace one of the laners. Like, Odo's not going to step up and be the carry because that's not what he feels most comfortable doing.
I feel like he feels most comfortable with it. I think he's just not a very confrontational person when it comes to the picks he does, but you can definitely center it around him being the carry. The most successful teams are the one they being on have been the ones that have done
that's
that.
What I mean. He doesn't feel most comfortable doing it. That's what I mean. He's not going to go out of his way to say that he will. Right.
Okay, but Tinks will probably recognize very easily that he has to do that, and then Tinks will do that anyway. So there will be other people on that team that will do it. Like, I just put 2 very vocal players.
But I mean, if they still pick, like...
And Steelback is notable for being the only support in the entirety of the ERLs that will actually gank top. Yeah, like, he's the only one. So I feel like this is really good setup then for Odo to carry. And they can micromanage their laners to at least not fucking run it down.
I also just feel like, though, if you have a mid who's willing to just, like, be alpha, though, then that can easily just win games for you. Like, Misfits almost made playoffs or whatever just because of how fucking ballsy Febiven is, so.
Yeah, but Febiven had... Oh, wait, you mean last year Misfits?
I'm talking about this recent Misfits roster, right?
This recent
Misfits
they
were
roster.
In playoffs.
Yeah, they were in playoffs, and Febiven had Razork, and Razork after week 2 was fucking nutty. So, yeah like, whereas if you put leader on that team, he's just going to get gank level 2 every game and die. Like, he's not going to have a jungler, he's just going to get anal. Like, you have a very aggressive mid, but you won't have a very aggressive mid jungle.
Yeah, but even just going with, like Gilius is someone who'll just fucking sit in mid if you tell him to, so.
Or he'll do, like, some... Yeah, so I mean, Gilius... Okay, so are we keeping Gilius on there and not Lurks? Because they kicked Gilius for Lurks, so...
I mean, he is on the roster still, so...
Alright. I still think that I wouldn't do that. I still think that I would just. I agree
with you. There are more. I think
I will also point out
this is a roster where you can make a lot of changes.
I will also point out that AbbADaGe, even if vocally he isn't that way, he definitely does play aggressively. In fact, he plays probably too aggressively and looks like an inter. All right, our issue of him has definitely not been one of passivity.
I really don't agree with that. I feel like he doesn't really go for as many opportunities as he could. So I don't really agree.
In lane, I don't view that as an issue. In lane, like he will frequently die under enemy.
No, not in lane. Like, I mean, in general. Like,
yeah, but right now I'm talking about leader dying level 2 in laning.
He won't win a game with a top. He won't win a game off of. If he gets a lead, he won't win the game for.
Put it this way,
I agree.
Just think of the Forgiven period. It was just AbbADaGe gets like 3 or 4 kills and then does nothing with it.
Yeah.
But no, but that's fine. I don't want to play around mid, but I do want my mid laner to at least maintain priority so I can shift it into top side so Odawamne can do his thing, right? And then Odawamne will carry the game for me. Then it's incidental if AbbADaGe gets 4 kills or not. I'm just saying that
Odawamne's not going to go out of his way to say that he wants to carry, and teams aren't going to set up.
But you can put him on that. So if I put people vocal enough on the team to realize that...
It's not naturally his personality to do that.
I actually kind of disagree with that. I think that it's not his Okay, I think if you put someone like Forgiven on that team, then he won't. If you put someone like Leader on that team, then he won't. But if I don't put Leader on that team and I place jungle support and he suddenly becomes a de facto loudest voice of the carries, then he will. Forgiven was overpowering when he was there, yes. But even then, there was a point where they just started playing Jace all the time. But yes, for a while he didn't. All right, and when he was on that Splice lineup, yes, Kobe would demand that they wait for his spikes and shit, and therefore they were playing heavily to bot side. But even then, there was a breaking point where that wasn't what they did. All right, he will get overpowered by other voices, but I do think
a lot harder to win with a fed top laner than it is with like a fed or fed mid.
Probably, but I can't really play around the lane if I don't fix jungle support anyway, and I can only replace 2 things, which is why I'd rather place 4 things.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that as well, but I'm just saying that, like, I think you can get mid laners who will tell the jungler what to do and then get ahead and then win the game for you. So
this video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Tobias Bernasconi, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on the upcoming talk shows, interviews I have? Maybe you want to take part in one of those Patreon donator discussions with me. Well, for any of the above perks and more, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.